We have public comment cards on the back door. There is a public hearing scheduled at 11 a.m. this morning on a land use type of subject. Typically on public hearings, it is not a requirement to fill out a speaker slip. We don't have the limitations of the 30-minute total. We will, be holding to a 3-minute limit on the speaker, on the individual speakers. But again, if it's on the land use issue, which is item 7 on the public hearing, it is not necessary. If you filled one out, that's fine, but it's not necessary to fill out a speaker slip for that particular subject. But on others, it is. So again, please feel free to grab a slip in the back of the room. Okay, it is 10 o'clock now, so we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. It's Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017. It's 10 a.m. We have to my left County Council, Commissioner Gold, myself, Commissioner Huxley, to my right, Commissioner Boyce, and to his right, the clerk, John Jesuit. Do we have, if we move to agenda item 2, before we get to what's shown there as A and B, do we have, and I believe it's Commissioner Boyce this morning. Do you have any agenda amendments, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Travel policy we've discussed 3 or 4 times. It was not on the agenda prior to the 7-day requirement, and all of a sudden it showed up on the Friday final that we get usually around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't know why that was put back on the agenda when it didn't make the deadline. And I had arranged for Commissioner Melissa Cribbins from Coos County, who would be willing to come down and testify and offer some insight on why she believes this travel policy may be too restrictive. And I didn't have the opportunity to get her here today because she only had 3 days notice. So what I would propose is that we have a continuance on this and offer, I think a workshop would be much in order, because we've had considerable testimony on why this is not good for our county. And it's become a bureaucracy that I have to, as a commissioner, that I've had to deal with, and it goes along with the bureaucracies in the state and the federal government, and it makes it harder to defend this county. And I can give you plenty of examples, and already have in several previous meetings. So I would entertain a motion that we consider a workshop on this and move it to a later date. Thank you.
So are you making a motion, or at this point?
I'm looking for a motion. So, okay, yes, I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we continue this to a later date and put it under the workshop category and get some wise input from other people around the state, other people around the county, and come up with a new policy if that's your desire, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion? Okay, that motion dies for lack of a second. Do you have any other?
Yeah, an item, let's see, Mr. Chair, 5 public comments. I know that's aside from our public hearing for the zone changes. You have here 3 minutes per person, but then you have additionally 30-minute limit for all public comment. We've never discussed that. And I think it gives, I've said in previous meetings, oh, you all act shocked, okay. I've never ever heard that we have a 30-minute limit on public comment. The point is, the basis is, we need to encourage public comment, not discourage it. And it almost gives characterize or phrase that way, almost gives the appearance that we're annoyed by too much public comment. I appreciate your preference of quick and short meetings, but it's hard enough to get the public to come to these meetings and participate and the value that they offer, as I've stated in previous meetings, is really important. So I don't know where that phrase come from or how it was added into.
Mr. Chair, I believe that was in the
Commissioner Gold?
decorum policy.
Correct, that it was, and there was much discussion on it on many occasions.
Much discussion on it. 30-minute
Public.
limit per meeting. Okay. Thank you. That's all the amendments, changes that I would request, Mr. Chair.
If I make one other comment on that subject, I would think if we were,
Commissioner Gold, okay.
I would think if we were going to make a motion to extend that, I think that could be done. I've never seen public comments go over 30 minutes, so.
Not to get bogged down, but this was, and we have the, rules of decorum for meetings. It was over a period of many, many discussions, many weeks. And it was approved back on, finally, after a memo, I don't know, it was probably about a 10-page memo for, that we discussed on March 22nd during a workshop on the rules of decorum, and then it was approved on April 5th of 2017. So we've certainly discussed,
But no surprise, I was opposed all the way through that very lengthy
Okay.
process, and it's compromised priorities, in my view, as
Okay.
you well know.
but it was
Yeah.
certainly discussed. Excuse me, in the back, please. Hello? Hello? No, I'm sorry. Okay. Let's keep the conversation down, please. We got it out in the hallway now? Okay. Commissioner Gold, do you have any amendments?
Actually, yes, the executive session, number 14, we need to discuss the negotiations that took place yesterday, SEIU negotiations. I don't have an exact,
So you're
Number
wanting
for
to
that.
add an executive session?
Right.
Correct, and so, Mr. Chair, I can also speak to that a little bit. Yesterday was SEIU negotiations, and we wanted to present the board with an update on that. There would be no decision by the board after this, and I will give the chair the statutory language. Basically, the Oregon Public Meetings Laws allows the board to go into executive session from any duly noticed public meeting such as this without any prior notice other than the notice of the meeting. And so adding the topic of the update on the union negotiations from outside legal counsel, it's anticipated to be brief. And so that's just some background on Commissioner Gold's motion to amend.
Would you provide or do you have it handy, the authority?
Well, going off the top of my head, I think it's ORS 192.660 sub 2, and I think it's sub D is to confer with the representatives in labor negotiations, and the labor negotiations is also the only state executive session justification that does not allow media to be present in the room as well. And again, there would be no decision by the board on the item contemplated, and it's thought to be brief.
Would you just repeat the number, please?
Well, I'm going to look it up, but I believe it's ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub D, but I will try to confirm that.
And you mentioned there was another authority that allowed it to be added at a meeting.
Oh, yes, yeah.
If you have that one, or could get
Okay,
that one too,
sure,
please.
sure.
You don't have that on the top of your head?
Well, I think it's also 192.660 sub 1, but we will see how good I am shortly, anon. So let me see here.
geez, you even used that Shakespeare language, that's good.
Yeah, I could have said 2 shakes of a lamb's tail since we're in Curry County. But, it might be longer than that, actually. Let me see here.
While you're waiting.
192.660, executive sessions permitted on certain matters. ORS 192.610 to 192.690 do not prevent the governing body, this is 192.660 sub 1, does not prevent the governing body of a public body from holding executive session during a regular, special, or emergency meeting after the presiding officer has identified the authorization for holding the executive session. And then the authorization for executive session is 192.660 sub 2, and this is sub D, to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. So it's allowed by statute at a duly noticed meeting, and that would be the statutory authority that we'd have the exec session under.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
job.
Good work.
I don't want to say I've been doing this too long, but
Got
I
that
think,
one
though, that it
memorized.
said in
Not
there,
saying
too,
that.
it required that the authority be referenced.
correct,
So
Mr. Chair.
that's why
Yep.
I think
No,
it
we're
needed to
crossing
be.
the T's and dotting the I's
Okay.
here.
Commissioner Gold, did you have any other additions?
No,
Or-
that was it.
Okay. I don't have additions, but I would ask for county council to comment on why the travel policy, because at the prior general meeting 2 weeks ago, we had agreed that we would continue that and put it on this meeting, and why it didn't make the cutoff on Wednesday, or?
Sure. So, and because I personally didn't recollect that when it was time to prepare the agenda, and so what happened was, we go through our usual agenda preparation submittal items, and the agenda packet is prepared and then subject to review on Wednesday by the Board of Commissioners and other, county officials who put input on the agenda, finance, clerk, et cetera. And then it was commented that the board directed the travel policy to be brought back today, and that it wasn't submitted in the agenda, so we followed the process for a late submittal, and then it becomes here on the agenda amendment for the board to consider. So that's how it didn't get included, and that's how it is on agenda amendments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Let me hold that. I'll make one comment here. While we're on this, then, on the travel policy, it's shown as old business. I would suggest that we move it to agenda item 12, old business.
So is that a suggestion or a motion?
Well, that, I would have a suggestion and see if there's consensus for that first before.
I'm
then
fine
I would
with
ask
that.
for a motion then.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to do that?
I move that we move
Mr.
the...
Chair. We have people here that are ready to give testimony on this today, I presume. So are we going to move it to the end of the day? Is that what I'm understanding here? And I had something else to offer.
I think, Commissioner Gold, you still have the floor, and you were trying to make a motion when you were interrupted.
Okay, I make a motion that we move the travel policy to item 12 under old business.
Do we have a second? I second the motion.
So I'm,
Any further discussion? Now
Yeah.
we're open for discussion.
I appreciate not being
Commissioner Boyce.
censored again. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so the public knows and the board can be reminded, about a month ago, well documented, I sent in an agenda item before 5 o'clock to Administrative Assistant John Jesuit, and because it didn't go to the BOC office address, technicality, that was denied. So that's, I hate to use the word hypocrisy, but it does look that way, and so it didn't make the deadline for last Wednesday, and consequently, I couldn't get people here to testify on 3 days' notice. So thank you for that time.
Mr. Chair,
Okay, Commissioner Gold?
could I just mention one other thing? It was brought up at the last meeting to put the travel policy on this meeting, so that would be one reason to be sure that it gets here.
Okay, so now we'll call for the question.
Aye.
No.
Aye. Okay, so we'll move that to item 12A. There's one other item that is shown here on agenda amendments. That's item 2B, was an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with the Department of Education. And I don't, on my notes here, know who added that. I'll ask County Council, do you know who added that? I assume it was after the cutoff date also, ending up in being listed.
I think this came from Juvenile and Parks.
Okay.
And I don't know the details of why. We don't really ask why when there are late submittals.
Could the Juvenile Director, could you just come up and just briefly let us know so we can move on this to put it somewhere, please, as far as an item?
Jay Charles, Juvenile Director, Curry County. So yes, this was sent down from Department of Education, OYA, as a juvenile crime prevention opportunity. It was emailed directly to the chair of the board for signing, and I understand it, Chair, that you didn't feel comfortable signing it without bringing it to the board. At which time I then sent it through an agenda routing slip to the BOC office, and was pleasantly surprised to see that it was potentially on this agenda.
Okay, do we have any problems with adding that to the
I don't have
agenda?
any problem with that.
Commissioner Boyce?
None here.
Okay, where shall we add it?
How about
Would
under
be
new business?
new business?
Of course, how much time is it going to take? We don't want to keep you
It's-
from your job.
It's not going to take much time at all. It's fairly, you know,
How about right after announcements?
or consent.
Okay. Announcements or
public.
consent.
Consent
Okay.
would work fine too. if-
Okay. We have a motion to move item 2B to follow agenda item 6, consent calendar.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, my memory on this, I didn't look at the document when I saw it came in from the Department of Education, and somebody wanted just to, they said, sign it and send it back. I certainly would not do that.
So it was irregular. It definitely
you
wasn't
know,
norm.
I forwarded it to legal
Mhm.
for action at that point. That's,
And then he
that's what
contacted me to
occurred.
put it on-
And it
on
went
the-
through the system, and here we are
Yeah.
on the agenda. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one. Move to,
So we'll call that 6D.
well, no, it's not going to be in consent calendar. It's just going to follow as a separate item.
Okay, so we'll call it,
Okay.
oh well, doesn't matter what we call it.
Yeah, to the, okay, do we have any other agenda amendments?
No.
No. Okay, then we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Do we have a second? I second the motion. Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
No.
Aye. Okay, moving to agenda item 4. Announcements. August 9th, 2017, there was a workshop at 10 a.m. in this commissioner hearing room. There are 2, apparently at this point, topics scheduled. One is Brookings Head Start, and the second is emergency Management Coordinator. Item 4B on August 16th, which is the next scheduled general meeting for the commissioners at 10 a.m. And announcement 4C is August 17th, and this, I believe, was discussed at the last general meeting, I believe. There'll be a Board of Commissioners workshop in the evening down at the campus, the CSWAC, our SWOCC campus, just at the north end of Brookings, and that's scheduled for 6 p.m.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Gold?
Just to mention that this is called the Sprague Commons Room that we're going to be meeting in, just as you go in the door. Prettiest place on the
Sprague?
SPRAGUE.
Can you use it in a sentence? I'm sorry.
The Sprague Commons Room is located at
I'm
SWAC
sorry.
campus.
Thank you. That was.
I believe it's
Our
Lone Ranch
conference
Road
room.
or something like that.
I will refrain from making spelling bee jokes. And also, this is also a it's a joint workshop, right? We have other government entities, and isn't City of Brookings going to do the minute taking and something
Yeah,
like that?
City of Brookings
Correct.
will be involved. Also, the Curry Health District will be
Okay.
involved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Gold, nice effort on that.
We're working on it.
Very good.
Okay. Do we have, aside from comments on the agenda item 7, the Curry County Comprehensive Plan, do we have any public speaker slips, John?
Yes.
In the order that they were, I assume, received? Okay, that's on the zoning. This one is not. There's one here from Catherine Wiley. It says public comments. What was the topic?
Issue that was raised in the July 19th.
On the, is that the travel policy?
Yes,
Okay, let me just note that.
but it isn't regarding the travel.
Okay, so it's not regarding something that's on the agenda today, correct? Or it's a matter of where I place the.
It's regarding a comment. I wanted it under public comments because I have a comment to the.
Okay, okay.
Because it's relating to what occurred at
Okay,
July 19th.
okay.
I got
Okay, and then we
gabbled,
have
maybe.
another one. Okay, I see, we have another card. Okay, thank you. And travel policy, and then Dave Barnes, we have a comment, and it just says public comment, just not related to anything here. Okay. And then we have another one that says new business, and that is related to something that's not here again? So two cards that are not related, okay. Can you squeeze them into 3 minutes? You think, or not? Okay, we'll give you a little on that. Okay, so. Okay. So the first speaker slip, and these are, nope, sorry. Reversed. Okay, the first speaker, and these are general comments, is Jeremy, is it Dumire or Dumire?
Morning, Commissioners. Jeremy Dumire, Rogue Hills and Ophir. Recently took a trip with the family to see the Pacific Northwest, and on my travels, we ended up stopping in Wallace, Idaho. It was a really beautiful area. Got really curious about the history of the town. So for me, I wanted to find out more about the area. I go to the Sheriff's Department. And I got a chance to meet with Captain Jeremy Groves. We sat down, we talked for probably a good hour, hour and a half about the area, its history, what it has to offer, and kind of do some comparisons to Curry County. Wallace, Idaho is part of Shoshone County, Idaho. It's the very northeast corner of Idaho. Like Curry County, it is 3/4 federal land, 71% Forest Service, about 3% BLM, very limited private land. Unlike Curry County, they are better prepared in their services. Their general fund revenue is $12 million. Ours is about 2.5. Their sheriff's department is fully funded. Their sheriff's department has 17 deputies on the road. We have a half dozen. Now, you would think for some county to have that many deputies on the road, to have a funding of that nature, that it must be a large population. Shoshone County, Idaho has a population half the size of Curry County, 12,000 residents. And they have 3 times the presence on the road that we do. They also have a jail that holds 84 inmates. And they're adding deputies to their roster. We have cut from our budget 2 positions. And at this point, I have not heard since the budget hearings any new proposals to find revenue sources for this county to stabilize us for the next budget cycle. Instead, we've sat here and waxed poetically on a travel policy that is going to retard this county. We have looked at hiring a county administrator and even an interim county administrator to do your jobs, instead of trying to tackle the fact that this county needs a revenue source to sustain itself. During the budget meetings, I asked for 2 things. I've not heard any answered. One, I asked that this county recognize that it does not have a spending problem, that it has a problem with revenue. That has not been answered. I also asked that this county look into forming committees to get something on the ballot in time for the next election. Now, at this point, you have until December 22nd, as I understand, to have a ballot title put together for the next May election. You're wasting my time and the county's time by not focusing on what really matters and being able to provide services for this county. And I understand I've got a few seconds left here. I'm going to say one more thing. Mr. Barnes, you should be able to speak for no less than 6 minutes. This whole idea that we are limited to 3 minutes per comment and 30 minutes total completely takes away from each and every person that wants to speak and give testimony to this board. This little device here in front of me is absolutely sickening. We should be afforded,
Thank you for your comments.
we should be afforded the ability to speak freely and engage you directly. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, last Tuesday I was at Legislative Revenue Office. Paul Warner, who is helping me put together a possible plan, not saying I support it, 2.5% sales tax, which would raise substantial money for the county. If it was done in a way that could be publicly accepted and properly administrated, I think it is a possible option down the road. He is working free and helping us greatly. And part of the December deadline is outlined by Mr. DeMeyer, is that I have tremendous concern that the state of Oregon will come up with a sales tax sooner or later. The legislature is spending out of control, as you've heard me say in the past, and if they do, none of the counties or cities will be able to change. I think it's a fair assumption, will be able to change and administer their own sales taxes. I think all 3 of us agree here that a property tax is not the answer, but a sales tax may very well. So I've spent a little time in that office, and I'll have a report down the road. So to Mr. DeMeyer's concern, I am working on a possible proposal, and I brought it before the board twice to see if I could even get a consumption tax advisory committee. Both times I was voted down. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's all.
Catherine Wiley is the next speaker.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Seems that the topic of the day is citizen involvement, so this makes my concerns particularly appropriate. Thank you, Curry County Commissioners and County Council. This is regarding access, public access. The position taken by Commissioner Boyce at the July 19th, 2017 Board of Commissioners meetings was both disappointing and diametrically opposed to his purported position of representing the citizens of Curry County as his sacred duty. I am the person who submitted 161 words to Commissioner Gold as public testimony regarding the new travel policy. I am also sure this is no surprise. The reason I was unable to drive over 50 miles round trip to Gold Beach and sit for hours in a claustrophobic room to provide my comments in person, as I have on many occasions previously, was that I was in the outpatient surgical unit of Sutter Coast Hospital, leaving home before 6 a.m. and returning around noon. My personal experience is not unique. There are innumerable reasons why the citizens who, as far as I know, are still at the top of the county organizational chart are unable to participate in person. Reasons include the Board of Commissioners meets in the middle of the morning, in the middle of the work week, thereby excluding those fortunate enough to have jobs. Your constituency consists of a majority of seniors, many of whom can't drive to Gold Beach or shouldn't. People in poverty who don't have cars or money for gas. People who feel unable to stand and speak in a public forum, especially when issues are often so contentious and or biased, as well as illness, infirmity, or disability, etc., etc., etc. Is citizen involvement encouraged, or is Mr. Boyce's proposition really the answer? Per Mr. Boyce, no written testimony submitted by citizens should be included in public testimony. Only written opinions, diatribes, information, or evidently anything from elected officials would be accepted. That certainly clarifies who Mr. Boyce actually serves. The only elected official Mr. Boyce has repeatedly read into the record has been the former commissioner who treated him to dinner on taxpayer money. This might be viewed as a biased opinion or conflict of interest. I suggest a Board of Commissioner policy that supports written testimony submitted by citizens in advance of Board of Commissioner meetings be held to the same standards and policies applied to live testimony. The agenda topic identified, the reading time limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, and submitted testimony read in order of receipt not to exceed a total of 30 minutes. And that has to do with access. You know, I am in support of limitations because when you run meetings too long, you lose any effect at all. As for elected officials, I would actually support that as well. The conditions being all elected officials, including our federal representatives, are included, and their individual and cumulative testimony be limited to the same restrictions as we citizens, the commissioners, were elected to represent. Specifically, there are things at the federal level, including impacts on the timber industry with NAFTA and healthcare issues that could absolutely devastate this county. So I thank you for your consideration of a constructive solution.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, the last comment Ms. Wiley made, I could not agree more with the overreach of the federal government, and that obviously requires a lot of travel and a lot of participation and contribution. So I agree with you. If I understood you right, and okay, so you don't think that the federal government is overreaching on our public lands, for example? I don't mean to turn it, huh?
I don't think we need, to get into a discussion
Okay.
like that.
If we need to change the policy, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to work on a workshop on that as well.
The next speaker slip is for general public comment from Dave Barnes.
Good morning, all. I'd like to jump ahead to the public, to my new business comment, because it kind of follows up with what Ms.
Okay.
Wiley said. Where I come from, we used to, the governments there had a, all correspondence that was received by members of the Board of Commissioners, or whether it was just sent to the board in general. John Jesuit, I hate to do this to you, but it's extra work. They presented as a Schedule A on the agenda, a list of all the correspondence that was received since the last meeting. It has a date, it has the name, and it had a brief description of what it was: solicitation for funds, suggestion for something. And this was attached to the agenda. It had its own separate section on the agenda as a correspondence section. Everybody gets a copy of it. The correspondence is available for anybody to review beforehand. And if any of the commissioners wanted to pull a piece of the correspondence specifically to read it or to talk about it during the meeting, that was what was done. It was a working policy. It seemed to work very well for the people back there. And I know, as Ms. Wiley said, and as I've sat here and seen myself, there's contention about how outside letters are brought into being part of the record. And that's just a suggestion for you on a way to get started. If you want to do something like that, I'd love to talk to you about it. Like I said, I've seen it happen before, and I know how it works. So that was my comment on new business. My second comment is that today is the first day of the Curry Andronimus Fisherman Lower Rogue Salmon Derby that's happening out here on the river. It runs from August 2nd to August 5th. And on Saturday evening, there is a banquet and lots of raffle prizes to be had over at the event center. And my last comment is that this year in the Curry County 4-H Fair, my honey was awarded the best tasting honey in the fair.
Right.
Wow.
Thank you.
I was hoping you would auction these off for the
you,
county
Dave.
budget. It would raise a ton of money.
Thank you,
I
Dave.
don't have enough. It's artisan honey, so.
Thank you.
But following up on that, my goal as a beekeeper was always to produce good tasting honey. And, I know what you people go through up here. I know I've sit through all your meetings. I hear you all. And, I know what you've accomplished in the last 6 or 7 months that Commissioner Gold and Commissioner Boyce have been up here, Commissioner Huxley as well. I'd like to, without having a goal for where you want to be, it's really difficult to get there. And at the next meeting, I was wondering if each of you commissioners might be able to just tell me 3 goals that you have for the remaining time that you have in office. You're working on a travel policy. You've gone ahead with the county administrator. But, after that's done, what's left? What are you going to be doing for the next 3.5, or in case of Mr. Huxley, next 1.5 years? What are you going to be doing as commissioners?
Eating honey.
Enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
So for the record, those are all below $50 in value would be,
Yes, they are.
That's
So no
debatable.
quid pro quo, right?
well, you don't have to declare it on your gift declarations.
This one's autographed, so it might not be below.
Thank you.
Is it?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, put that over here. Okay, that was the public comments not related to the public, or the hearing, which is the zoning ordinance. So if we go, it's only 40, I'm trying to see what we could move. And we had, if the commissioners are okay with this, just there are 2 other items that won't, I think, be long items. One will be what was item 2B, the intergovernmental agreement that we moved
Are we going to do the consent calendar
Okay,
first?
the consent calendar, and then the other one will be 8A. So, okay, let's go first through the consent calendar, then we'll have two other open items, and we'll see what the time is on that. So, for consent calendar had 3 items listed. 6A was appointment to the Mountain Drive Special District Road District Board. 6B was an order correcting a scrivener's error in order number 20305. And item 6C was, we'd moved this from the last workshop that we had on this, the minutes for the April 5th, 2017 general meeting. So do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as submitted?
I move that we approve the 3 items in the consent calendar.
I have a question. My consent calendar shows 4 items, and it shows, I'm not sure what the chair is looking at, but mine shows a C as a new hire Parks Community Service.
Everybody's going to be looking at you.
That on mine it's shown as 8A, administrative actions and appointments.
Okay.
And
John Jesse, do you want to speak to that, or?
What's the 4th one?
Well, the 4th would have been the minutes. So it was, the agenda I'm looking at from the agenda packet on our internal website is appointment to Mountain Drive, correct scrivener's error, new hire Parks Community Service, and the minutes. And John Jesse, you want to speak to that?
Yes, I was in the process of uploading maps from the zoning to the packet, and there was too much data. I could not afford to have cut the maps out. So in the process of recombining all the Word documents and PDFs, this got, I used an old agenda instead of the amended agenda, not amended. Final agenda would have 8A in it.
Okay, so the chair is looking at the final agenda, the agenda on our internal packet. Okay, so good. So the chair has the final agenda. Thank you. Okay, so there are 3 items on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Sorry
Excuse
for
me
the
one moment,
interruption.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Folks, we do have quite a few seats up here in front if you like. Maybe we can get a few more folks in. Come on in if you like.
So we had we did have a motion to approve agenda item 6A, B, and C under consent calendar as presented. And I don't think we got to the point of a second on that.
I'll
Do
second
we have
that.
a second?
And one comment, I'm glad to see that we've got the minutes on there finally. Thank you, Mr. Jesuit.
Okay, so do we have any further comments on agenda item 6? Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then we had moved in the agenda amendments earlier, agenda item which was shown as 2B, intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Education, and that was for the juvenile department. So do we have any comments first from the director? You want to?
Good afternoon. Jay Trost, Juvenile Director and Parks Director, Curry County. This agreement is between the state of Oregon acting by and through the Oregon Department of Education for the Youth Development Division and Curry County. This is juvenile crime prevention dollars that come down through the state to help fund and provide several of our different prevention programs that we run throughout the county. Helps offset some of our staffing costs for prevention, material costs, and overall planning costs. So this goes towards many of the groups that we offer in the schools, after school activities that we do to keep kids into pro-social activities and out of trouble. Yes.
Oh,
County
Oh.
Council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I could, just briefly on this item, if I'm not mistaken, when you look at the actual grant agreement, it has the chair, Tom Huxley, as the county's, point of contact or administrator of the grant. And then it also, I think, if this is the grant I'm thinking of, requires us to designate. Is this the one that says we need like that entity? Am I thinking of the right one? Sorry, Mr. Trost. I think I talked to Mr. Trost about this item, and
We've had a few of these similar types of IGAs with, could be.
let me take a look here. If I'm not mistaken, there it is. It says that we are supposed to have we're supposed to designate the Curry County lead JCP, the Juvenile Crime Prevention Organization. So what I was going to recommend, if you look on page, and this is if it's acceptable to the board, it was just to try to, I don't want to, so if you look, I'm looking on page 10, 9 and 10, the bottom of 9, top of 10, where it says section 4 authorized representatives. It almost goes back to why this got submitted late. Because if you see, Mr. Chair, on the top of page 10 in your packet, it says county's authorized representative Thomas C. Huxley, Moore Street, etc. Are you seeing that there?
Mm-hmm.
And what I was thinking is it might make more sense to have the juvenile director, Jay Trost, be the county's representative. And then further on, it says that we're to designate a lead JCP, and we didn't quite say that. And what I thought we should do is change Thomas C. Huxley to Jonathan Trost, juvenile director, the county lead JCP. And that would be just a suggested change, so that then when it comes time for them to administer this grant, Jonathan Trost is a person at the county, and it's not going.
Just signature authority to the
Right.
to the juvenile director.
Right, but also designating him as the county's authorized
Correct.
representative. We've had some issues with authorized representatives on grants before in the past, and I just thought this is really going through the juvenile department. Director Trost, do you have any issues with that, or is that acceptable to you?
Not at all. There's,
Sorry, I asked two questions, and
Not at all acceptable.
I know exactly. Thanks, Commissioner Boyce.
Okay.
So that is acceptable to you. It's not a problem having you there.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
So that would be the only suggested change I would have on this one, is to where it says the county's authorized representative, instead of Thomas C. Huxley, have it be Jonathan Trost, juvenile director, county lead JCP,
Okay.
and we can make that change, after the meeting if the board so moves.
Commissioner Boyce?
Director Trost, is that, that's to your budget, or contribution the state's making, is that the same amount as the previous 2 years? Do I have that correct?
It's very close.
Okay,
Yes.
so it wasn't a big cut. Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the IGA with the suggestion from Council Huddle that we change the contact person to Jonathan Trost.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks. Sure. Might stick around.
Okay.
Am I next?
Why don't we take and then we'll be pretty
Okay.
close to 11 anyway. This one was shown, at least on some of the agendas, as agenda item 8A, administrative actions, appointments, new hire, Parks and Community Service Coordinator. Director Trost.
Yes, so this is the new hybrid position that we put together at the last budget cycle, combining community service and some parks coordination. We're really excited about this. We did some extensive recruitment. We got just a great pool of applicants. Kudos to the HR department for being able to bring that kind of applicants to the table. We ended up selecting Joshua Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins comes with a lot of experience in the social service work and in parks. Currently works for Harris Beach State Parks, has worked for national parks, and also spent a lot of time working as a social service investigator for child welfare in California. So not a stranger to working with youth, not a stranger to working with parks. It seemed like a very, very good fit, and we're excited to potentially bring him on board.
So I move that we approve the new hire for the Parks and Community Service Coordinator.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
County
Director
Council?
Trost.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's all. I had
Okay,
a
thank you.
question. I noticed that we're having a attendance coming in. I was wondering, Mr. Chair, I thought with the technology we had, and I'd like to check with our contractor.
Downstairs?
Right, are we able to overflow into downstairs and then have these people attend, and they could basically
They
watch
could watch from the
monitors?
screen. I
Right,
believe so, but
and come up and
let's-
talk when they wanted
let's-
to?
Maybe if we could ask.
Okay,
uh,
I can do that.
or
I'll be
just
right
if-
back.
If Charles would come in.
Hey, that you've got some help back there. They'll do it.
Okay, here he comes. He's watching.
He's got bionic ears.
Usually that's with some advance notice, I need some sort of recess kind of stuff.
Well, he's requesting a recess. We have 10 minutes, and it might be a good opportunity for people, if they weren't here
Okay.
for that item, to...
Why don't we, because I say, there's certainly a lot of people that aren't
Mhm.
hearing and seeing what's
Yeah.
going
We
on.
need to get him a chair.
Why don't we, it's 10:51, why don't we recess until 11 o'clock, which is really when the public hearing is to start anyway.
Sure. So does everyone understand? We have another room with monitors. Our goal is to have this meeting be displayed downstairs so you can attend in more comfort. And then if you want to talk during the public comment period, you can come on up and talk. So it's just a way to let everybody see what's going on without being crammed in this room.
Okay.
We're going to take we're going to, sure. Good.
Yeah,
And
we'll do
talk
that
to 'em.
now.
And
Okay,
we're
so
taking
we're
a
going to
recess
take a
till 11.
recess to 11.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Hello.
Well, let's see what he's got to say. Okay. Okay, thank you for everyone's patience. I just got a thumbs up from the PEG, or the video operator. He said it is hooked up downstairs, so for individuals that would like to, clearly not everybody can fit in this room, but there are more chairs downstairs in what we refer to as the blue room. There is also a screen like the one in this room where you could sit down.
Can't hear. Cannot hear what you're saying.
Okay. Where you could sit down in the room down below. Where's Carol or John? Why don't you help?
Can you hear me?
Show some of the people.
I've got a
out
loud
in the
voice.
hall where the blue room is, and we'll get some people who
Can
who
I
get
make the
down there.
announcement, because I've got a loud
Okay.
voice? Just to let you know, folks, if you want to go downstairs to the blue room, you can see the videos, and then if you want to make a comment, you can come upstairs to make the comment. But at least you'll have a seat and see the presentation. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. I've got a loud teacher voice,
So we're still going to give it a few minutes to where people that want to do so can walk. I see some people in the hallway walking down now, so let's be, if you would, be patient with us for a few more minutes so they can get downstairs, and for those that want to, and to watch and listen to this from a secondary or an overflow room.
We will close it, we'll take care of it, as soon as you stand by. Thank you. There you go.
I need my sign-in sheet back. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's give just a few more minutes because I
Sure.
think John was going to walk some people down there.
Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, we can leave that door open, can't we? Why do we want it shut?
Well, I think it was just from the noise, or
Let's leave that door open so she can sit in front of the, yeah, she can sit in front of the door. Thank you.
It's too hot without it.
We won't even go who wanted it closed. So.
Track star, huh?
So, John, then are individuals that want to have been shown where the...
Some people want it, because they want to speak.
Okay, well, again, anybody that's down in that room downstairs that does want to speak is absolutely welcome to speak. They would just have to come back up. So everybody that wants to speak will be given the opportunity to speak. So that said, it's 11:13. What we have here is a public hearing, and this is the Curry County Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance Amendment related to natural hazards. There's up here is the Community Development Director / Planning Director, Carolyn Johnson. She has, to begin with, I'm assuming, a presentation, but you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's great to see such a big turnout. We sent out about 5,600 Measure 56 notices. You got those notices because the state of Oregon requires that anytime we amend a piece of our code that has to do with land use, you are notified by mail, so that's why you got it. In some cases, there's a concern that that's going to affect, whatever's being proposed is going to affect your property values, which is, I'm sure, is a good reason why you are here. So I'm going to do my best to walk you through a brief presentation today. And Commissioner Huxley accurately noted what this is about. We're looking at an amendment to the comprehensive plan, which is kind of the big picture land use policy for the county, and also looking at the zoning ordinance, some zoning ordinance amendments related to natural hazards, specifically liquefaction and landslides. What I'm asking the board to do today is accept a brief presentation from me, open up this public hearing to anyone who wishes to speak. I'd like them to hold a brief discussion, and then I would like them to continue the public hearing to November 1. Now, this is a little different than how it's normally handled. Usually the public hearing is closed, they talk, they make a decision. But because I'm asking them to continue this to November 1st, and I do not want to have to send out another 5,600 postcards at great expense, I have asked them to simply continue the public hearing. So if you can't stay today because there's a lot of people and you have somewhere else to be in the next hour and a half, you can come back. If they agree with this idea, you would be able to come back on November 1st and speak. If you want to speak today and you want to come back on November 1st, you can speak. You would be able to speak again then too. This will be up to the board, though, to make that decision if they want to accept that recommendation. So that being said, I'd like to give you just a little bit of background. Let's see, this is kind of touchy. Give me a... last year, the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, they worked with myself and some other folks and the Planning Commission to develop some draft changes to our comprehensive plan policy that talks about protecting folks here from natural hazard problems, landslides, liquefaction, coastal erosion, tsunamis, wildfire. Also included in that is flooding, but we're not going to be addressing that right now, and we didn't go through that a whole lot this last year because FEMA has not finished their maps. That's a whole nother conversation that I'll bring up at another time. I'm sorry. I think I just went through that. What we're looking at today is that amendment to that comprehensive plan chapter, and we're looking at some new zoning ordinance sections related to liquefaction hazards and landslide hazards. And I've been asked I've probably talked to 60 people on the phone, well, why are we doing this? Well, the state of Oregon has some new maps that they've put together through Dogami. They used a lot of new technology, and they would like us to be able to use those maps, but the county has to adopt those before we could put them in place. So part of that is the mapping here. If you see, there's a roll of maps over here, and there's probably a good 20 of those. And were I able to line them all up against the walls, they would look something like that map. It was just a little overwhelming. We talked about downloading the maps, but that didn't work out. So one of the things that I did with a number of folks that came in or that contacted me was I went and I created a map of their individual property, because we do have the layers for these. So if you are able to leave your email address and your phone number, I'm going to follow up after this so that if you do want a copy of your own property, I'll be able to send you something. The primary focus of the amendments in the zoning piece of this are to have a geologic analysis that would be part of a building application or a subdivision application for new development. The county already has some codes in place that require a geology report, but the wording of that code section is somewhat outdated. One of the things that is now required by the state of Oregon is for a geology report to be valid, is that it be prepared by an engineering geologist, not just a regular geologist. And I wish I could tell you exactly the differences, but I'm not an earth sciences person, and I'm not exactly sure. But that is some of the new state requirements. The idea is that you would have that done and you would submit it with your building permit application. So when you have your architect putting together your plans, that geology report would come along. So if they needed to identify some heftier footings or some stem walls or something that could create more protection for you in your home construction, that would then be possible because you'd have the plans. The same thing would also happen if you wanted to subdivide your property. We'd need to see a geology report for that. Well, how does that differ from what we have today? It provides some exemptions from the requirements. For instance, if you want to add on less than 50% of the existing footprint of your house, you can do that without a geology report. The current regulations don't have that provision. It requires some follow-up by the engineering geologist who prepared the report. There's some requirements in the draft language that say that the building official they have to sign off on certain things during the building permit review process. It also includes a requirement for a hazard disclosure statement that's filed against the property before the county would issue you a permit to build. So if that happened, if you went to sell the property, the new buyer would see it on the title, and they would know that this is a requirement that's in effect. A lot of times folks will say, well, my realtor didn't tell me that. Well, this was kind of a safeguard to plug in so that people would know. One other major thing is that it provides for a deviation from the setback requirements without a variance if you have a less than 50% that you're asking for. For example, if there's a setback requirement for your building of 20 feet, and because of the constraints due to liquefaction and landslide hazards, you really need to be able to go to 10 feet. You can go through that process without having to pay extra money and ask for a variance from the setback requirement. And the last piece is that it references the use of the most recent Dogami maps. My earlier comment about having somebody come on November 1, that will be a Dogami person who is very well versed in this, and he will be able to explain what those maps are about, how they were developed. There's a lot of technology that has gone in them, and we want to use the most recent thing that's out there, so that would be a difference. For landslide areas, some of these are similar. Actually, they're all pretty much the same as if you were in a liquefaction area. And The first part of this ordinance talks about other natural hazards. I mentioned them earlier: tsunamis, coastal erosion, wildfires, flooding.
Carolyn?
Yes?
I would just ask you to speak more into the microphone, or maybe hold one if you want to
Sure.
move around and talk.
Can I have that? Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm going to be bringing that back to the board at a later date. So if you're in an area that you think also you may have some coastal erosion or tsunami threat, tell me about that when if you sign in and I call you or send you an email, and I'd be glad to send you more information. Public notification, I think I talked about the postcards that I sent out to all of you already. I think my number was a little bit off. It's 5638. And we also published a notice in the County Reporter. And I've talked to about 60 or 75 people who have either called, emailed, or come in. I see a few of you here that came in. It was really helpful to hear from folks beforehand. The primary concerns that staff was hearing was that property values could be impacted, the cost of the geology reports, what that would be, the soundness of some of the draft language. I got a lot of comments on that from a number of people. In fact, I'm going to mention a few here in a minute. The validity of the new maps, what makes these maps right or special, and then the ability to read the maps. On the postcard that you got, it gave you a link to a website, and when you went to that, I heard from many people, you opened up and here's this monster map, probably the size of that. Those are rolled up over there. I think I mentioned it before, and it's really difficult to ascertain where your property is on a map like that. So I want to renew my offer to help you locate that if you want to contact me. So let me get to the next slide. I just talked about that. One thing that's important is those maps that I'm mentioning have not yet been adopted by Dogami. So if between now and ultimately the time they're adopted, if they're adopted, we would be using the old maps to process any applications that need geology reports. In closing, there was a very robust response by the public to these notices. I've got this notepad here, like the first 40 pages of it is phone calls and messages and notes of folks we talked to. I'm asking the board to hold off on a decision on this today. I'd like to give you all the best opportunity to speak and then come back and speak some more. It's really important that you came and that you want to talk about this. I mean, the board values your comments. I value it. It's great to see everybody be so involved in the public process. That's kind of what this is all about. Again, I'm recommending that there be a public hearing continuance to November 1. And what I want to use that time for is I'm going to sit back and listen and write down all your comments. And I know I'll be getting stuff from John as well. And then I will be reviewing those with the Dogami staff, and I'm also going to sit down with DLCD as well. They helped us put together the language to begin with. And to the degree that there are changes that could be made and still accommodate the intent of that safety focus that we want to create for everybody, so much the better. Lastly, what I would like to do also is I'm passing around some sheets. Trudy is helping me here. She's dressed in red as well. And if you put your email address and your phone number, I will follow up with everybody who is here and wants me to contact them. What I'd like to do is, I may think about having, setting up some meeting times, just one-on-one, maybe 5 or 10 people at a time. If folks want to come in when I have some revisions, I think that's a lot easier than trying to cram everything into a public hearing. But I want to be mindful and respectful of your time as well. So I think that's about it. I'd like to reserve the opportunity to come back and speak again if I can. And one more thing, the board received a packet, and it was in the packet as well, on the website that you were able to read, and I had included some public written comments that were presented prior to the packet going out. Some new comments came in, and new information came in after the packet went out, and I'd like to just read the title of them so I can make sure that they are in the record. One came from Dennis Bowman on Monday the 31st. Another came from DLCD. It was a memo from the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. It was an article about landslides and mapping. A second one from DLCD was the licensing requirements for geologists and what that means for government planners. And then last, Dave Felucci, where are you? He might be out in the hall. He submitted some written comments too that were very helpful. I think that's all I have for now.
Mr. Chair.
Hang on a second here. Carolyn, I think one point, just so we don't forget it, you brought up at the first, and I would just ask for consensus among the board that we will continue this and allow anyone to speak at the continued or hearing or hearings, as the case may be. So do we have concurrence for that?
Definitely.
Yes.
Okay, so we have that now in the record.
Okay.
I think second, to open up to the public comments, we'll open up the public comment period. I think with all the people here and with your having the handheld mic, we may be better to pass
Sure.
the mic around rather than have people get up that are way back at the end of a row that want to come up and speak.
Okay, sounds good.
Just so you hold the mic pretty close and you can see what Carolyn has done here.
Okay.
It certainly was audible to me, and it sounded like throughout the speakers throughout the room.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Boyce, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's safe to say I speak for a lot of people here. 1973, when the Land Conservation and Development Commission established through the Thousand Friends system or group, the land use process, since then, Multnomah County has been essentially controlling rural counties. And rural counties are standing up. They're looking at, just for one example, what it is of our county is 67% is owned by the federal government. 22% is owned by private timber. 7% is owned by agricultural entities and farms, ranches, etc. That leaves 4%, past, present, and future development. We have enough trouble with the housing shortage we have here, attracting developers. And the reason you have the people here today is because they are in a position that, yes, more than just their property values go down. The state of Oregon, there's been legislation proposed year after year after year to give the counties. When I was served as a legislative assistant in 2011, 4 counties for a pilot county to ease some of the restrictions so that there could be additional buildings, so there could be additional development. We couldn't even get close to getting that legislation passed. And there's been subsequent legislation similar since then. So here we live in Curry County. We've already had to spend a lot of money to try and do what the state obligates us to do. We don't get enough help from them on that. When you hear new technology, that means new restrictions. And people can't operate under that. The more I learn about the lack of housing we have at all levels, it is a huge issue, and we need help on this from the state. And one size does not fit all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. It's 11:32. Why don't we, again, cards, these speaker slips are not required. We did have 2 individuals at the front end of the beginning of the meeting that did complete speaker slips, so I would say that we'll allow them to speak first, and then we'll just, as hands come up, we'll pass around, or even John or somebody here to
I can do
pass,
it.
or yourself to pass around. So let's start.
Well, actually, would you mind doing it, Trudy? Pass it around, because I want to be able to take notes.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
And
And before you start, if I could, it's really going to be helpful for me if you say your name and what area of the county you're coming from, because I'm going to include that in all my notes. I'm going to be taking notes as well. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start the first card here. And again, there are two, and again, people do not have to fill a speaker slip out. What was Carl King? Is Carl, okay, he's right here. And please do limit, because we don't know how many speakers, John, we'll still put the timer on to 3 minutes, please.
Carl King, Nasika Beach. I have had the distinct pleasure of attending most of the Planning Commission meetings and hearings for the last 5 years. Trust me, your Planning Commission is not populated by a bunch of liberals who want to take away your property rights or your property value. They are, in my view, representative of the people of Curry County. They have spent hours studying these issues, and they will continue to spend hours studying these issues. And I would recommend to you that you give Ms. Johnson your contact information and that you attend their Thursday late afternoon, evening meetings and participate in the discussions, because they have not simply rubber stamped something that has been handed to them by the state or anyone else. They have had lengthy discussions and disagreements among themselves at times on the language and on the impact of this. But their primary goal has been to deal with these hazard districts by providing a code that protects the population of Curry County with respect to hazards. And that is what the goal is of all these. And again, I'm not going to speak on the, I came, as many of you may know, I came from that terrible state of Massachusetts. And we believe in regulations that protect the life safety of our residents back in Massachusetts. And I think these proposals are intended to do that here in Curry County. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker was Jeffrey, is it McLean?
Yes.
Pass that down to you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for an opportunity to talk to you.
Would you, just for the record, would you get and identify yourself and
my name is
location?
Jeff McLean,
and are you in the...
and I live in the Cape Sebastian area.
Thank you.
I have had, I'm a fairly new resident to the area. Been coming up to Curry County for at least 10 years, and I've owned property here for a couple of properties for a 10-year period. Recently, I got the notice from Ms. Johnson's office, and I've had an opportunity to talk to her and communicate with her a couple times here over the last few days. My couple things. One, I support her request for continuance of the public hearings. I'm glad you just hear you agree with that. I do have some serious concerns about these proposed changes and how they affect property owners. And so I would encourage the board to delay any adoption until more people have a time to review this material. I'd like to see some input from a variety of other organizations to the board, hear what their comments are and read them and digest them. Excuse me. I have at least a dozen general and specific comments I will submit to Ms. Johnson regarding this material. And I probably have at least a half a dozen recommendations. I would caution anyone listening to the hearing this morning, and I appreciate Ms. Johnson's summary comments this morning, but I would caution you to read the material carefully. I recognize Ms. Johnson's limited time to sort of present this material. There's a lot of material in the specifics that go well beyond the summary material that affect people and affect what you can and can't do, and some significant disclosure matters. And I thank you for your time. Again, I will submit my comments and recommendations, and if there's anything else I can do to provide assistance, please just ask. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll open it up to anyone. Okay, I see the hand came up there first, and then we'll take the lady in the. Let's go ahead up here first, and then we'll get to you next.
Can I make one comment before we get started?
Commissioner Gold.
I would like to have a summary of the comments to look at before this decision is made. Could we get a summary of that, Carolyn?
I was just going to ask, thank you, Commissioner Gold. I'd like to be CC'd by everyone that sends to the Commissioner's office, and I assume that's also what you're asking separately for me.
Well,
All the written comments that I receive will be part of your public record next time.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
again,
If I
County
could,
Council.
thanks, Mr. Chair. And I know this is a public hearing and people are appearing in person. To have standing, you can appear in person or in writing. And so you can submit written comments as well, which will give you standing to, if need be, make a challenge or an appeal of any board action. So you don't physically have to appear here in person to have the ability to make a later challenge or protest at a different level to the ordinance if the board adopts one. So I just for reference, but yes, and then if you do want to submit comments to Director Johnson, I think submitting them also to BOC office, BOC _ office at Curry County would also help. But if you need that email address, we can put it on the board or something. But starting with Director Johnson makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
It may, I think rather than compound from the BOC office and who's next, I think it should just go to Director Johnson.
Okay.
He's going to make it all public in one packet, and then if the BOC office wants a copy, well, they'd be getting a copy anyway, just in
All right.
the internal procedure. So
Very
let's
good.
not complicate it.
Okay, thanks.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I want to give them the option.
So the next speaker,
More
please.
restrictions.
Next speaker, please.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. My name is Larry Kammer. I would like Carl Netkin to have an opportunity to speak because what I'll do is I want to make some general comments, and he has some very specific comments regarding the language in the proposed ordinance. I've been involved, I've been involved in land development here in Curry County for over 40 years. As a land surveyor, land consultant, planner, real estate broker, I've personally developed over 300 parcels of land, and most of those now have homes constructed on them, and the owners are contributing to the tax base of Curry County. Since the 1970s, I've experienced a constant assault of additional restrictions, adding prohibitive costs and stifling potential development. I was going to get into the percentage of land that is available in Curry County, but Mr. Boyce has already addressed that issue. I personally think it's less than 1%. Most of it's included in urban growth boundaries and city limits and already been developed. One of the things that troubles me more even than this proposed ordinance is that recently you commissioners voted on a county road ordinance with no public notification to the tax-paying property owners that are affected by the proposed changes. If I interpret, the only way I found out about that was I read an article in the Curry Coastal Pilot, and if I interpreted the article correctly, you voted on a new private driveway ordinance creating more bureaucracy and more fees without any public notice to tax-paying property owners, and I question the legality of that particular vote. Curry County has good road standards that were established after months of work with Dan Crumley as roadmaster. I attended many, many meetings. I am in agreement. The road standards should be enforced unless the property warrants a variance and the specifics adhered to as closely as possible. When one is filing a platted partition or subdivision, an engineer is required, but is also required with our present rules, and to suggest that an engineer be involved in all private driveways to individual dwellings is unreasonable. Curry County presently has many ordinances and standards already in place that address virtually every aspect of land development. Trust me, I know. Instead of creating more rules and fees and discouraging development on the very limited amount of property available, I suggest the county should enforce the ordinances that we do have and be as flexible as possible to encourage quality development on the remaining lands. I do understand the state is asking the county to do certain things, but that hasn't changed over time. And as Mr. Boyce pointed out, the county needs to control its own existence and its own financial state as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there was a lady in the second to the back row there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sandra Shabata. My husband and I own the property by Geisel Monument. My first general question is that I hope if property values are going to be lowered as due to this, I hope the county considers the tax ramifications. I think the revenue may be somewhat affected. The second thing is that my husband and I have an easement to the Nature Conservancy on our property, and we would like some specific private time with Ms. Johnson to talk about our concerns. Is that possible? Thank you.
Any other hands? Okay, there's one directly in the back.
I'll go up there. Yeah, it's crowded back there. I'm Carl Netkin. I've been a realtor broker in Curry County for 22 years. I spent approximately 12 years on the County Planning Commission. So I have heard a lot of different issues come to place. I agree with Court on the front that we have a very small amount of developable land, and these restrictions are focused on the property owners, when yet some of the biggest culprits to causing problems in hazard area are the road department, their forestry practices, and so forth. That's a bigger concern to me. I know you're worried about protecting life, but I think we all know we're in hazard areas. We have development standards already. We already have, if you're in a hazard area, that you have to have an engineering geology report come out. My concerns are primarily with the language. I understand adding liquefaction and rapidly moving landslides. We already have earth flow slump topography. We already have flood. We already have stormwater detention. We already have all these things. But basically, I'll go through my notes here real quickly because there's a lot I could talk about for a half an hour easy. So basically, with all these excess restrictions, and I call them excess, and I believe they're excess, people aren't going to get permits. And I'll tell you a perfect example why. I'll use one of my properties, for example, which is very stable, which has never had an issue. It was developed in 1978. There's no drywall cracks or anything in it. This is one of my properties. And it has a low roof pitch. So if I want to go in and I want to make a 412 roof pitch and raise my ceiling height a little bit, I have to get a building permit. Well, if I have to get a building permit, now I've got to get an engineering geology report. Gee, when I get that engineering geology report, I've got to put a statement on my deed that says I'm in a chronic hazard area. And by the way, chronic, if you define chronic, is persistent and consistently reoccurring. Nothing's happened on that site in 40 years. So it's site specific. Matter of fact, Bob Bush came out on the property and told me I'm in good shape. The mapping is good for a general sense. Even though the science is much more sound, I'm sure, than the old one, it's still only a general sense. There are areas that I see, Bob sees, are certainly hazards, yet they're not on the map. And there's others that are certainly safe, and they are on the map. So you're unduly making people comply with a standard that's going to devalue their property when in fact they don't have a problem to begin with. Okay, that's one thing. A better approach, instead of trying to put something on a deed that's going to devalue the property, it's going to make it potentially difficult to insure in the future, because if your insurance company sees that deed, they're going to want to raise that, would be to, when somebody goes in for a permit clearance to do some renovation, we have county counsel. He knows how to draft legal things. What about a general hold harmless for all hazards, and that you're aware of what you're doing? The way it's drafted right now, if you put that on the deed,
You're saying that you're going to defend those hazards on that property. Well, once it's on the deed and once you've done that work, number one, you've hired third parties, okay? You've hired an engineering geologist, which, by the way, at your discretion, without criteria in that ordinance, you can review with your own geologist. Then you can take your own geologist criteria and request that we comply, we the homeowner comply with that report. Okay, so we go ahead and comply with that report, and then we have to put our stamp of approval on it for perpetuity in a deed that we're going to defend it. What about the third parties? What about the people who are licensed that you hire? That's giving them a break too. It puts way too much burden on the property owner. It lets other people get away with it. And guess what? People aren't going to get permits. They're not going to even go through that process. They're going to say, the hell with it, I'll put a roof on my house and I won't get my permit and the county won't get revenue and all the new development fees that this county doesn't need because they're so rich already are going to go away. So there's that issue. How could you hold somebody accountable for perpetuity when they've gone through your process at your request and hired the professionals in the field to do what they're supposed to do to protect your interest? Why is that fair? Somebody can rebut that if they'd like. Okay. And again, I agree with Sandy, the future value is affected. Sandra, excuse me. If the future value is affected, what about the tax base? What's it going to do to it? We need growth. We don't need to stifle growth. This stifles growth. What about the variances on the setback? Okay, for liquefaction, you're going to automatically allow a variance of 50%, okay, to the best site, okay? Now, how does that affect fire protection? How does it affect the adjoining property owner that may not be in that hazard area in the first place? And so you're now affecting their property rights. And what's a more imminent danger? Is it fire, or is it that we have liquefaction because of the Cascadia lets loose? Frankly, if the Cascadia lets loose, our hospital's in it. I mean, come on, there's massive, this town's destroyed anyway.
Hospital's going to survive.
Well, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, at that point, who really cares? And what's the possibility for a fire? Much higher, especially with temperatures like today. Okay, so chronic is a really bad word to put in. I don't think anything should be put in a deed. And let's face it, everybody all over the country has some form of hazards. Tornado Alley, sinkholes in Florida. I mean, the San Andreas Fault. I mean, the way this reads, you could hardly develop anything east of the Sacramento Valley if they implied this criteria in California. Think about it. So, yeah, the biggest thing is this county needs growth. It needs revenue. We're all struggling. We need the support. I agree with Larry Kammer. We need to support the existing zoning ordinances. I do agree we need some criteria for liquefaction and rapidly moving landslide. They can't be drafted anything like this. This is a taking. It's overreaching. And it does, I mean, okay, let's talk about, again, I talked about the liquefaction. What about the new development having to be in the only safe area on a property? If you're in a land hazard area that's mapped on that map, some of them are like whole global areas. They're thousands of acres or several hundred acres. And so what if you're a property owner that has a 160-acre tract of land, wants to come in for a conditional use approval to site a dwelling, or you're zoned residential, it doesn't matter, and way back in the east corner, there's a section of that land that's not mapped as in the hazard area. You're going to mandate that they run thousands of feet of road and utility lines and cut all through that hazard area to put a site way in the east corner, which is not conducive to the development of the parcel in the first place because it's the only safe site on the parcel. That makes no sense either. If you're already hiring a geologist to mitigate any potential hazards, let them mitigate it. They're the professionals. Don't question their work. I wouldn't question a geologist's work because they've spent many years in the field, in the practice, doing just that. And I think that it's quite questionable that the county, under a development standard, can question a certified engineering geologist and get another report of their own without any specific criteria and without any expense limitations on the property owner. If I was somebody from California or New York or wherever, and I was coming into Curry County and I wanted to buy my retirement land, and I read that criteria, I'm not buying it. There's too much risk. They're going to move on to another county. They're going to go somewhere else. And everybody talks about how restrictive California is. At this point, if that goes through, there's no difference. I'm done. I got a lot more to say. Thank you. So,
Mr. Chair. So
County
you
Council.
were referring to notes. Will you be able to reduce some of that to writing to submit?
I got
for
chicken
the
scratch
record?
here I could fix. I wanted to
Thanks.
actually prepare a letter, but I got too busy with work.
Okay,
Busy
well, I
time
think
of
we're
season,
gonna,
so.
yep, I hear you. We're gonna
Yeah.
leave this record open. I think you'll have time to do that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. No. I think actually you're
Mr. Chair.
Hang on, we have another, who was next? I didn't catch who was first. Okay,
Come on in.
over here.
So we're asking you to say your name and
Thank
where
you
you're
much,
from.
sure. Ed Thomas, off of Myers Creek Road. First, let me say, if you want to find out the exact details.
You got to do a little better job.
Okay,
because-
how your property is affected, Director Johnson will help you. She'll give you a plot that tells you exactly what you need to know. And I did that. She was most helpful. Here's the question that I have. You acknowledge that property values will be affected, and that has to be an understatement. I mean, I would think that some property values would be eliminated as a result of some of these classifications. And I was wondering,
Get a little closer.
yeah, is that, I practice law for a living. Does that constitute a taking? I mean, have you got a legal opinion as going to that issue?
And
Is
so
that,
those kind of things would be addressed on a case-by-case basis. And when you read those takings cases, I think you know they're very case-specific. So in general, you know, we put out the notice that says, I think it says it may be affected, and then everything else would be a case-by-case basis.
okay, but my question is, do you have an opinion backing it up that this is not a taking? Because you're doing it en masse, so to speak, on a very large scale. Here's as a previous speaker said, here's so many acres, and that it's a landslide hazard zone. Now that, do you have an opinion somewhere that says this is not a taking, a condemnation in essence? We don't have that.
I haven't rendered an opinion on it.
Okay, all right. And here's, and this touches it as well. I'm sorry. Sure.
I'm going to give a try to answer your question. This language was originally drafted with DLCD, and I have a pretty good idea that probably their legal staff took a look at it before they wrapped it up and brought it out to all the counties in the state. So I think we can find out from DLCD on their model language if they had a legal opinion.
Yeah, I would certainly recommend that. And here's a specific point going to the taking issue. I was looking at one of the maps here. This is on the liquefaction one, the very large one that was on the website. And it says that updated mapping were classified into liquefaction susceptibility categories based on the unit's soil physical properties. I mean, have actual inspections been made, drillings, for example, geologic drillings to make those determinations? Because how otherwise would you know what the unit's soil physical properties are?
I think I can help you this much.
Sure, go ahead.
I can't give you a complete answer, but the Dogami use LiDAR technology and a whole series of other methods to identify these, what was going on with the soil. They're going to be here on November 1st. So I think we'd be able to ask that question at that time, exactly how they figured that out.
The reason I asked, and you and I talked about this last week, when we bought our property, we hired Ron Sonneville to come up and drill the hell out of things, and make all kinds of tests and so forth, and arrive at an opinion. But it looks like you folks, backed on by the state, are rendering large opinions, but without any of the hard, fast, we drilled it down and this is what we found kind of thing. So I tie that to my question concerning a taking, because it seems like painting with a pretty broad brush. And I'll give it back. I've shot my quad, so to speak.
Mr. Chair, quickly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
let's keep it
quickly.
going with
Mr.
the-
Chair, please, may I say something? We're bumping up against the clock here. I'd like to make a motion that we continue through and work lunch. I'll make that request again so that nobody's left out on their interest in testifying. The 2-hour rule that you set up, sir.
You need to read the document, Commissioner Smith, or Commissioner.
So we're going to work through lunch.
So we had the gentleman in the back, please.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Jesse Brewer. I live on Ophir Road. I'm retired. That means I'm not employed anymore. Thank God. And at any rate, I want to talk about value. And there's been some talk of, to kind of parrot some of the previous speakers. I purchased my property. I did due diligence. What can I say? I bought it in good faith. And now, forces external to me may render the value of my property as being worth less than the market would prevail. So my question is, what recourse do I and or other property owners have to make ourselves whole again to recoup that loss? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, never practiced law, never developed property. But if I'm going to suffer a loss in the value of my estate through no fault of my own, I want to know what mechanism do I have to recoup that loss. That's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Savage, and I live in Brookings. And I'd like to confirm my understanding. If I hire an engineering geologist, and he or she comes out to my property and determines that this site is a viable site using specified engineering to build whatever it is I'd like to build, if it just so happens to be in the mapped area, then the mapped area takes precedence and I cannot build regardless of what an engineering geologist tells me. Is my understanding correct?
You want to grab the mic?
What was that?
It says safest sites. Carolyn, you might
Yeah.
need to talk.
I mean, so your map says that it isn't safe, but my engineering geologist who has specifically tested the property and developed a scheme of engineering for which I can build, am I still precluded from building?
There's another part of the zoning code that talks about variances or deviations from the code requirements, and we would look to that. I have to say that.
But you're, okay, and I understand variances and the process and how that works, but you're now creating a mass of land for which many people will not even look to build because it would require a variance. And that just doesn't make sense to me when this, you know, with all due respect, commissioners, unless you are an engineering geologist, I would not expect that you would have the information or the authority to override that person's or require me to have a variance on my own property. And put something in the deed, thank you, that says it's chronic. And you absolutely cannot tell me that you know for sure that this is chronic on my property without having an engineering geologist confirm that. My opinion.
I'm Linda Tarwater, and I live up Hummingbird Hill Road off of Vista Loop. And I want to step back a little bit here because you're talking about a zoning change. Let's talk about FEMA, flood zones. Flood zones are hazard areas. Why can't a geology area be just like a flood zone? A hazard area. It does not go on the deed. But there is insurance protecting people, and if they want to get a loan or whatever, they have to get flood insurance. What's the difference?
Thank you. My name's Laurel Gerkman, and I live in Cedar Valley. I was wondering what the historical basis is for the imagery on the dogma maps. As an example, I see there's a red area in our parcel that we moved soil from building a shop and created a garden. Now it's fill, but it's just a little personal garden. But certainly, you know, if you were looking at it from above, it has changed. Our neighbor across the street recently moved some soil on his property as well to develop a barn for horses potentially down the road. That's where his red spot is now. So I'm wondering, what are they comparing to in order to make, you know, these assertions in land use?
Chair Huxley, can I answer that?
Yes, do you want to comment?
Yeah, Carolyn Johnson,
Carolyn?
Community Development Director. That is a point. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to make a note of that question that we ask somebody from Dogami when they come down here on November 1st.
We've lived on our parcel for 20 years. My husband's parents owned it for 40 or 50 years before that. And we're retired now and would like to add an extra room on our house. Oh. And so now we're facing all these criteria in order to do it and something attached to our title.
Thank you.
This Phil?
Yeah, he sure is.
My name is Dave Shuck. I live in Brookings. When I purchased my property, we did have an engineering geologist take a look at it, and he told me that he couldn't tell me more without drilling, so I'm curious how we can know so much on a broad brush basis without drilling in each of these areas. But my real question is, we've heard a lot about diminishing property values, etc. I would like to hear more from Ms. Johnson on what the motivation is for this zoning change. So far, it appears that we have some maps that we didn't have access to before, and so now we can go in and do more restrictions to, as I heard it, to preserve life and property. But I'd like to hear more detail on that, because it seems like there's some pretty big ramifications, and I would expect some pretty big downsides if we don't do this, so I'd like to hear that.
Any other hands? We have some hands right out here in the hallway.
That's fine. I speak pretty loud. Are these mics on?
Yes.
I speak relatively loud, so you shouldn't have a problem hearing me.
Mr. Chair. So the prior speaker wanted a response. I think if I could, it seems like some of the comments are sort of similar. What's the remedy? Is there a takings? Those kind of things. I think at the public hearing wouldn't necessarily to be so much a question and answer, but we would take the information, synthesize it, and in the next public hearing give the general answers. Because I think what we're hearing is some of these questions are similar. People have similar concerns. I think we're going to group the concerns and prepare responses for the next hearing and come at it again. So the fact that we don't give an exact response or answer to any particular question today doesn't mean one won't be forthcoming, and that we'll have more time to discuss it. I just wanted to make sure people's expectations were kind of understood today. That's all I had. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. My name is Chris Hood. I'm at P.O. Box 118 in Coos Bay, Oregon. I'm with Stunstener Engineering and Forestry. I've been in land use planning for over 25 years. I worked with Coos County Planning Department, and subsequently I've been in private practice for over 20 years, basically supporting the property rights for the people of Coos and Curry counties. With regard to these ordinances, I think prior to establishing or acknowledging or adopting any ordinance, I think the first thing that needs to be done is there needs to be GIS maps established that clearly show the general public at a glance where these zones exist, how it affects their properties. So this isn't a question and answer game. It doesn't come into the planning department and having them have to do research in order to provide you with information. I've looked at the maps that they have online. I can't distinguish what properties these landslide and these areas affect. So there needs to be something very clear done. If you have something, that's great. I have some questions for the commissioners and for staff. First of all, what does assessing the risk of life to property posed by new development mean? Are we talking about a potential development exacerbating a situation within one of those zones? In other words, causing problems as a result of the development? Or are we looking at preventing damage to development due to a catastrophic event? And there's a major difference there. Historically, within these zone districts, what you had to demonstrate was that you were not going to exacerbate a situation through your development, through erosion or through weight distribution or in some fashion to cause a slide or an issue to happen. But if we start talking about preventing damage to development in a catastrophic event, all bets are off. Every analysis I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty of them over the years, what they do is they come in, they'll come on the property, they'll look, they make recommendations for development, broader footings, erosion control factors, things like that. And then in the end of every one of those reports, they totally disclaim anything occurring due to some type of catastrophic event, an earthquake or something like that. You're not going to find geotechs or geological people who are going to come in and going to claim that if you build on a property that nothing is going to happen if there is a major event occurring. So clarity is very important in these issues of what you're trying to get to with regard to these ordinances. And that, once again, what is the threshold of the hazard that must be addressed? Are we talking about the on-site remediation again, or are we talking about potential for landslide due to a substantial event in the future? If so, what level of earthquake? Are we talking about a tremor? Are we talking about a 3-point, 4-point? Are we talking about a Cascadia event, an 8 or a 9? All bets are off. Everything's going. Doesn't matter if you're in a zone or not. You know, so what levels are we talking about, and what kind of reports are we going to be getting on these properties that gives any kind of assurance that there's never going to be any damage either to that property or to human life or to properties that are adjacent to that development? I don't know how you do it. So with regard to filing disclosure statements, hazard disclosure statements, first of all, will it reduce property values? And I think everyone here is expressing that. The language that's in the ordinance right now is that you will put in that the property is subject to chronic natural hazards. Who's going to purchase a piece of property that has a chronic natural hazard associated with it? It's automatically just a kill for any real estate that has a deed restriction imposed upon it that says that there's a chronic natural hazard. Will it increase property insurance? Question for you. Who's going to review these reports at a county level? Who has the ability at a county level to review one of these reports and tell whether the report is accurate and whether the measures taken within that report are actually going to mitigate any issues associated with damage to the property or adjacent properties or to human life? I don't know that there's anybody at the county level right now that's qualified to do that type of work. So if you're talking about possibly going outside to hire other engineers to come in and review the report that's already been submitted from engineers, you're talking about some extreme costs there. We're talking about hiring a geological engineer first to evaluate the property, hire a geotechnical engineer to come in if there's issues associated with the property, and do some design work to assure that there'll be no issues with development. You're talking about a compliance review, a plan review of the plans for the development, an inspection of the development as it occurs, final compliance reports that will be submitted to the county, and then the possibility of the county hiring another engineer basically to review those plans. I just had a geotechnical analysis done in the city of Myrtle Point, and just to go in and do borings, baseline information, no reports, no development issues, nothing like that, just baseline report, $5,000, boom, right off the top. So these are not cheap things when you start getting geologists, geotechnical people involved with these. These people charge a hefty fee, takes a considerable amount of time, and their license is on the line. They're going to do a considerable amount of work. It's going to be expensive. So with that in mind, basically, with regard to the county reviewing these issues, Who's going to pay for it? Right now, we're dealing with a county that can't get conditional use applications out the door, property line adjustments out the door. We're not processing in Curry County. How are we going to go and basically start processing and adopt more regulations, especially with regard to these high-end technical analyses, and have those processed through the county with efficiency? So that's kind of my issue. And the last statement, I guess, is DLCD loves to come in for the state of Oregon and require that counties come in and implement more ordinances, more restrictive ordinances. It's happening on a regular basis. It's always more, it's a snowball effect. It's growing and growing and growing. I've watched it over the last 25 years grow from something manageable to something that basically is now fodder for attorneys in courts. But the question is DLCD going to help Curry County process these new ordinances that they're requiring you to adopt? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? I think there's at least one gentleman here.
Good morning. Al Davis, Chantrell Lane in the Nasika Beach area. First, I'd like to say I support and fully appreciate the comments the gentleman that spoke directly before me has made. Well done. I just have several questions that I would like to leave with the commission this morning, and don't expect answers, of course, but I would like to get them on record. The first one being, I'd like to ask the commission if they intend to create and investigate an economic impact statement that is related to the potential changes that you are proposing. I think you owe that to the citizens of Curry County to do that. Secondly, I assume that these permitting changes, ordinance changes, are something that's, as you mentioned earlier, have filtered down from state level. Does the commission communicate with other commissions throughout the state on a regular basis to see what they are doing to handle these pass downs from the state? Or do you work independently, unilaterally? That could add some value. And thirdly, I would like, at some point in time, someone with a technical competency to define what liquefaction is. Because I can assure you there is a tremendous amount of confusion as to what the technical definition of liquefaction is. And from my evaluation, it is not represented correctly in most of the material that is presented out there. So if we are going to be making changes based on liquefaction and those technical understandings are not well understood, there could be a lot of problems. And the last comment I would like to make is both of these ordinance modifications lead out in the first paragraph and address that they are being done to protect the life and property of citizens, whether they're citizens of this county or people that are traveling through that. The way I read the ordinances modifications now, if a person owns a house close to a bluff and that bluff is sloughing away over normal causes, not landslides and not liquefaction, quote unquote, and they would like to set their house back 100 feet, they will be unable to do that without going through this new permitting process, which may say there is no suitable point on their property, so therefore you can stay in the house that you have, which in all reality will have a higher probability of risk for additional slumping, but we're going to restrict you and make you stay in that residence that you have at a higher risk. So I understand if you can identify a little portion of land on your property that meets the criteria which have been defined in here, you might be able to put it over there as long as you don't exceed 50% of the reduction in the boundary zone. But if you don't have that, it's like, sorry, you have no place to move your house. You stay right next to that bluff. And if it sloughs off, well, so be it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Is there anyone else?
More out there?
Outside?
I needed to get hit, Mr. Chair, if I may. Sir, before you leave, I'm not going to be recognized here. I would like to get your name, if I could, please. I missed it. I apologize.
Al Davis, I believe. Al Davis?
Al Davis, yes.
Correct. Thank you. I can answer some of those questions for you, if I'm allowed to speak. But I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else outside?
I don't believe so.
So I'll take a turn.
If I could just suggest real quick that you make a statement, if there's anyone downstairs that wants to come up and speak,
Correct.
it would be a good time.
Correct. We did that earlier, so I don't know if...
It's okay. Thank you, Director Johnson.
A lot of people like downstairs.
Okay, just to check. Okay, they should, you know, if it was working, they would have heard. Hopefully they would have come up, but we'll just verify that. Okay, Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, you asked a good question there. One of them was, are we working with other commissioners? If you contact Klamath, Jackson, Josephine, Coos, Douglas counties, I think it's safe to say they know me on a first-name basis. They have been incredibly helpful. Certainly it goes without saying that they have some of the same issues that we have, representing rural counties that are struggling to survive. I mean, I don't know, when you look at the real estate that this affects, the builders, the building supply stores, I mean, you could just go on and on. My concern is, in addition to this is what this board has spent their time on, these kind of projects, for the last 7 months. And it is really frustrating to me because we were asked earlier, what are our goals? And I gave an 18-point plan that was pretty controversial back at the end of end of January, to follow through with what I told the voters I would do. And I haven't heard anything from Commissioner Huxley, but basically Director Johnson is under your supervision instead of working, and so these I believe represent your goals, and they certainly don't represent mine. And I think it's, as I said earlier today, mixed priorities. Just one example, folks. We have marijuana growers out of control in this little county. Do your research at Josephine County. Jackson County said, no rural growing allowed. And they have some pretty strict rules. What did they do? They went straight to Josephine County. People can't even, older folks can't even go out and walk in their backyards for considerable risk, potential of risk. And so I see that coming to Curry County, and I think those are the kind of things we need to be spending our time on. I don't mean to take advantage of this time here, but people are starting to see that this board does have, with all due respect, mixed priorities. And I could give you several other priorities that are way ahead of this. I know the planning department has worked very hard. I can vouch for Carl King's contribution and effort, and other planning commission members. But we have some huge issues that we've got to deal with. And frankly, I could sure use your help. That's all.
Okay, were there any other individuals who wanted to speak? Okay, thank you. Thank you for passing the mic around.
If I could just make one small point before I wrap up. I started here in September of 2015, and the board, before I came, accepted the assistance of DLCD to help put this together. So it was one of the directives in my hire to process and work with them. So I just want to provide some clarity that we as staff are here to carry out the mission of the board and their directives as a whole. I just want to make that clear. This is not personal. So that's the background on that. So is there anybody else that wanted to speak? Okay. I have emails. If you didn't get your email to me, would be glad to take it. I'll stick around if you want to talk to me after the meeting. I'm going to go back through and create my notes. I'll be working with Mr. Jesuit as well to get his notes. I think we noted that somebody from Dogami will be here on November 1st. But what I'd like to do, I'm going to craft some kind of a strategy to be able to connect with all of you before November 1st. I don't want a situation where a week before the meeting you get a report and then you come. So if you'll bear with me, but feel free to call me or email me anytime. You all have my email address and my phone number. Please do that. So you'll be hearing from me. Thank you. We'll work that out, yes. Yes. Thank you. Sure. No problem.
Thank you, Director Johnson.
Oh, okay. Just one more point that was mentioned to me, that folks should come up here if they have if they want any last chance to speak. The public hearing is not closed. It's
correct. It's
continued.
not closed.
Correct.
No.
So do we want to give folks 3 minutes to walk upstairs?
Are there?
Yeah, I thought that we had already gone down
Okay.
and checked, and there was no one that wanted to speak. I think.
Oh,
yeah, you'd already gone down.
I think they can hear the invite right now.
Correct. Well, that also, but you had
Went down
physically
there?
went down.
Go down there and there was no one that raised their hand.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you maybe should give them a few minutes
Okay.
in case they change their mind.
Did you want to speak, sir? Oh, sorry.
Jim Benson from Brookings. I just have a clarification. Is the coastal erosion and tsunami going to be discussed in November 1 or not at all?
Great question. The Planning Commission did go through those pieces, and I had them semi-scheduled, but I think given what's transpired here, we may hold off on those. If we are going to look at amendments to those areas, we'll send out a Measure 56 notice for those as well. But please feel free to call me and check in a month or so. I know nothing's going to happen between now and then, but we will keep you apprised. This notice was also in the newspaper as well, so thanks.
Okay.
Oh, here you go, ma'am.
We had one more hand.
I do know that.
Oh, well, hang on till she gets the microphone to you.
Sorry.
I do know that some of these notices didn't get to some of the landowners, including Al Davis, whom I called a couple of nights ago because he is living in a place with potential problems. And I also wonder when you're planning on a final vote on whatever you decide to come up with the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to...
Shibata, sorry.
Sure, no problem. The board has agreed to come back on November 1, and it is totally at their discretion to take action at that time or continue that item even further. So if they do, it would be announced, but I can't speak,
Everything
for
remains.
them.
Everything
Everything's
remains
open.
If the commissioners were to vote no, can that override Dogami's recommendations on the maps?
I would have to research that. I don't know that, John, I'd be kind of doubtful that there's a state mandate. There's a state mandate that every agency has to adopt every state
Let's do that.
mapping. I mean, I don't know. I would have to
Make
research
that
that.
motion. Give it a break for a year, huh? Maybe we'll have control of the legislature and get something done. But I have to be able to travel to do that.
I don't think you've been recognized, Commissioner
Sorry, Mr.
Boyd.
Chair, I do apologize.
Okay, I don't think anyone else has come up, so what we're going to do here again, to reiterate, there's, this meeting is being continued, or this public hearing. Everyone at this point who spoke or who wants to submit, as mentioned by County Council, any written comments has standing. Anyone who comes to the meeting on November 1st is more welcome again to make public comments. And anyone who wishes to contact Carolyn Johnson anytime between now and then is encouraged to do so and submit suggestions. I'd like to, it's one thing to be taking notes, but it's another if some of the individuals who had significant comments would care to submit them in writing also. So that said, going to take a recess.
I'm going to make a motion, Mr. Chair, if I may.
I'm going to take a recess, a lunch recess, It's 12:27. We're going to take a lunch recess and return at 1:30.
County Council, may I make a motion?
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone can make a motion, but we're in recess now. So.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to make a motion when we come back, so you don't have to hang around. I'm going to ask that the board wisely chair this for 1 year and put it under the workshop category, which will give you and your staff, planning commission people, an extra bit of time. And I think today could have been possibly better under a workshop than as an action item for the board. That's all. Thank you.
That's the power company today.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Okay, we're back to the lunch recess. It's 1:30. Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017. And we are up to old business, which was we had moved from agenda item amendments 2A to 12A.
Commissioner Huxley, may I have the floor for just a second?
Sure.
Commissioner Gold coming back, or?
She'll be back. She's in her office. I tried to go around there. She'll be here.
Okay. There was a kind of a miscommunication this morning about we're supposed to have a presentation under public comments from the ladies from the Brookings Emblem Club. They want to just take a few minutes just to speak about some quilts they'd like to donate to the Sheriff's Office and Brookings Police Department. And if that's okay with you guys, give them.
10 o'clock is being 1 o'clock. So they were here at 1 o'clock for the meeting, and so they would seek approval from the board to do a public
Okay.
comment at this time.
Sure.
Okay,
Certainly
so
okay with me, Mr. Chair.
So you got 2 out of 3 here. That sounds good. I think you have the floor then. Thank you, Sheriff.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, my name is Peggy Wilson, and I'm representing the Emblem Club of Brookings, Oregon, of course. These are our members of our Brookings Women's Club there, and we make quilts for children in need. This is one example for a little girl, and we're providing the Sheriff's Department with 5 boys and 5 girl quilts to keep in their patrol cars for when they come across children that are frightened or in need, and they will present these to each of the children. This is something we hope to do annually for our Sheriff's Department here, and we do appreciate your time, and I'm the one that screwed up on the time.
Very, very sincere.
So,
And the
these are
Emblem
quilts.
Club?
The Emblem Club is the kind of the ladies' arm of the Elks down in Brookings.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you
very
so much. And we are also presenting 48 complete backpacks down to the Brookings Elementary School. And we just found out about Wally's house, and we're going to go check that out. We're ladies with a mission. I'm sorry? Yes, we do. We all get together and cut out the quilts, and then we all sew them and put them together. Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's still true, but the Elks and the Emblem Club combined for 30 years, and it still may be true today, are the single largest contributors to college scholarships in the country, in the world actually. And so
I believe that is probably true.
It's a very proud heritage, and thank you very, very much.
Yes, I will. This is Virginia Frizzle.
Come on up to the podium.
Okay, come up here. Nani Rowland and Sheila Habar, who is our president this year.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we will accept these with honor because there are a lot of children that we deal with on a daily basis. So, and I'm sure it'll be quite a comfort to the little types. So we appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you and on an annual basis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm new to Curry County. I just moved here from Nevada. Aces, people. Aces. I love it here. So, yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Desert, water, and trees.
Tallest trees.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's 1:34, and we'll pick up with where we moved to old business under 12A, which was a travel policy. Let me see, we had two, we'll give the option, two individuals had submitted speaker slips on the travel policy. The first was Catherine Wiley, the second was Jan Barbas. Would either of you prefer to speak now or wait till the discussion?
Now is fine.
Okay, then Catherine, you were first.
Thank you. The main reason I am here is because of follow-up relating to the July 19th meeting that I, was disappointed in, with assumptions that people don't care to come, which was the impression of why it was suggested that my 161-word comment wasn't allowed to be read. So I'm going to read it now, and I'm also going to ask that during the discussion that the questions that I presented back then be addressed today. Having taken the time to present significant documented abuses of taxpayers' funds by elected officials in travel expenditures, I want to thank you for addressing the issue. The agenda item document is thorough and comprehensive and should provide the policy guidelines and restrictions clearly indicated to ensure safeguards for our extremely limited public funds. There are two issues which have been documented in previously reimbursed travel expenditures which I'd like to be assured are covered by this document. First, our travel expenditures incurred prior to actually taking office being sworn in excluded. In other words, until someone is actually an employee or actually sworn in as an elected official, should the taxpayers be paying any allowances prior to that time? Two, are there specific penalties included should any individual violate any of these policies, such as unauthorized payment approvals and/or payments from unauthorized department budgets? Sincere thanks again for your follow-up on this issue of public accountability, and I will comment that I did look at the video. That's how I knew what had occurred, and I can assure you that as opposed to someone who spoke in opposition to this, I have never been to a fancy hotel in Washington, D.C. or traveled anywhere else on the county's money. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Let me see, who was first today? Commissioner Boyce.
Was Barbara's going to talk?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you raise your hand? Did you want
Yes,
to
but
make a comment?
I did forget about our next speaker. My apologies.
Well, but did you want to comment to Catherine Wiley's?
Not now, thank you.
Okay. You have the floor.
Jan Barbas, Curry County, thank you. I do agree with everything Catherine said, but I've also read this policy, and I find it a little difficult. I think it's going to make travel very difficult. I think it may be a little strong. And I really liked that you guys are headed towards a county administrator. And one of the reasons I like that is that I think as the policymaking board, as elected officials, I like to see you at the table, the various tables throughout this state representing our county, and I think that's what we need right now. I listen to the voters and they say think outside the box, but then I study the box, and the box is the laws that tie our hands as to how we can raise revenue, how we can use revenue, how we can use our land, and a myriad of other restrictions and constraints. And we are limited within that box. We have to change the box. And in order to change the box, we've got to be at the table. So
I would just, but we certainly do need a policy. We certainly do need a reasonable policy. I'm concerned with some of the reimbursement rates. I'm concerned that the 3-bid thing might be a little much, particularly if you're going to a conference or something, you want to stay at the conference hotel. And I listened to Sue when she talked about this a few weeks ago, and she said, we can do this by phone. But I think what happens, you can do some by phone. You don't have to be at every meeting, but I think what happens is there's that direct personal interaction that occurs when you're face to face and you're in the meeting room and somebody's talking about something and all of a sudden the light comes on, and at the break you pull aside whoever from another district and you say, hey, I had an idea, and you get talking. That doesn't happen on the phone, or it's not as natural or easy. And so those collaborations and relationships, you don't develop relations the same, I think, on the phone, particularly in meetings. I mean, one-to-one on the phone you do, but when you're attending a meeting, you hit the mute button and you listen, and so I really would encourage a more moderate policy that allows you guys to represent us around the state a little more effectively and within the county. Thank you.
Thank you. So you had to raise your hand earlier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Point of clarification, in your letter that was not read at the board meeting, I can promise you that I did not know who the letter was from. I did not get a copy prior. Should have got a copy, but that happens somewhat regular here. It was going against the policy we had, which is open testimony. As you heard me say earlier today, I'd be happy to readdress that if that is an issue and we need to work on. Yes, and as you also stated in your earlier testimony today, it would be my preference to, at least when elected officials can't be here, to read anything that they want to run by the board and the public in general. And I think that's an excellent idea, but I'm just one commissioner. So I did not know who the letter was for, and in fact stated the letter could very well be in support of my position. You may recall that. I'm going to read a letter here, not a letter, just it's 2 sentences. Forgive me. Jetco Fire. Well, it's from, wow, Amy Armheim from Senator Merkley's office. I'll just state it so that way you won't be uncomfortable. I'm sorry. And she says, you two sounded great on the radio interview today. I was contacted late afternoon on Monday to see if David Brock-Smith and I could do a radio interview with Jefferson Public Radio regarding Sudden Oak death. And it was originally scheduled to be Senator Merkley and Representative Brock-Smith with the successes and the efforts that have been made on the sod. Very, very serious issues. So they called my office and asked if I could, very humbling and very honoring, if I could speak in the place of the senator with the effort he's made. And I'm very familiar with this issue. It was wonderful to be trusted by them. And so, yes, I think the interview went fairly well. And I think it's really good in public awareness. I'll get you copies of that, by the way, and then my response. I do apologize. I think I left it in my office. Anyway, it's a nice letter that is very complimentary. And that could have never been done without the various meetings that I've had with Southern Oregon Assistant Arnhem to Senator Merkley. I've met her at and other members of her staff at AOC meetings, certainly SOD meetings, ONC meetings. So I wouldn't have that relationship with her if I'd have got to know her by telephone. And I feel like this is a bureaucracy that is growing and a movement in additional time. That it really is, I don't know of a better word other than shocking, that we are spending so much time on this. I keep hearing references to abuses, multiple, if I understood your letter again, but yet I don't see any documentation. I was criticized, Miss Wiley, for having dinner with, and the county bought my dinner. Okay, it was $70. I was with 3 Coos County commissioners and 1 Josephine. Might have been 2 Josephine County commissioners there. It was right after the election, the AOC convention, and I would hate to, once I'm gone from this seat, I would hate to send commissioners out if they are absolutely, especially knowing how determined I am and austere I am in the money that I've spent in traveling for this county. I want you to understand, I'm going to say again, never have turned in a meal. I take my personal rig quite often. I do everything I can to save money. And so for this policy to become a bureaucratic level, for lack of a better term, it really sets up future commissioners, as Mr. Barbas just said, their hands are tied. I want to say again, and then I'll close, because I've said it all so many times before, and I've asked earlier for a workshop on this, and actually it was just a day, so to make sure I'm easy to understand there. I asked for a workshop so we could even invite other commissioners who will come here and help us and give you their rationale. They're increasing, as broke as they are, they're increasing their budgets for travel. And they also have trust from the voters. And I think I still have considerable trust from the voters. It's a new day. I've done it as cheaply as I can. I've been as responsible as I can. These folks aren't able or willing to travel. It is imperative that we have a representative out there. Commissioner Huxley absolutely mocked an AOC County College system that's been in position for a long, long time, that's used by every county in the state, and he refused to go, and then wants to make it so other commissioners down the road have to pay out of their own pocket after I do a voluntary pay raise of $20,000 this annual. I wish you'd give me the support on that. Thank you. And Commissioner Gold, did anything I say last meeting perhaps influence you that maybe I am right on this? Maybe there is justified travel. I've always run by, I give you, the travel expenses are there. We joke about me staying at Motel 6, and I don't wear that as a badge of honor. I think it's my responsibility. But you're going to restrict me so much that I can't be effective, or as effective. Thanks for listening, by the way.
Are you finished, Commissioner Boyce?
For now.
Commissioner Gold, do you have any comments?
Let me just say something about the travel policy. And the comment was made that I'm not willing to travel. Yes, I have traveled at my own expense. I'm not asking the county to pay for it. Oh, I need a mic, sorry. I'm not expecting everybody to do the same thing I do. That's fine. But I have made connections, and I'm using those connections.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
To help with, for instance, the health matters that we're looking into for South Curry County. So I think if someone needs more, they can come to the commission and ask for it. And I think that's okay, because we need as a county to really be accountable for what's going on. And I know you've made an effort to do that. I'm not disputing that at all.
Well, thank you. That's the first time you've admonished me on that, and I appreciate that. The very first time.
I don't think I was admonishing you.
Well, it has 2 different meanings.
Okay. It was a compliment.
I thank you again, and that's the way I took it.
Acknowledgement.
And appreciated.
Even a better word, okay. Anon.
Thank you. Shakes lamb's tails.
Did you have any other comment?
No,
comments?
no, I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce, this did you just
Finally
hand me
found
this-
it, yes,
this what?
from Amy Armheim.
So does the clerk, do you have a copy? No. And I don't think will you enter that into the supplemental documents? And I had made a comment on some documents that had been passed out previously, and I made the comments to the clerk here, that we should always, and as this documents, we should always see that if a document's entered or requested to be entered into the supplemental material packet, that it have the subject and the author of the document, where it came from. We don't need any more, anonymous documents.
Whoa.
So that's
Anonymous documents, you lost me.
unsigned. In other words, a document we get from you frequently, we'll receive
I just
a
read you an
document.
email. You're the one that insisted be in the
Okay,
record.
you're kind
I
of
don't understand.
going back and forth a
Whoa.
little bit here.
Okay, so I'm just going to pass these back to you, and you pass them back to the clerk, please. Thank you. Okay, so we have County Council on the travel policy. Did you want to make any?
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't have a lot to say. This is the product of some meetings. Again, the presentation was made at the last board meeting, and the sentiment from the board was to bring it back at this meeting. Since that time, I took comments from you and incorporated those that resulted in changes. It's about a half a page shorter. References to specific budget items are removed, and then some other provisions that were just difficult to understand were tried to be clarified.
Okay.
My reading of it is the spirit is substantially the same as the previous version, but the wording has just been changed and some unnecessary language eliminated. So really, we have gone over this travel policy multiple occasions. I just don't have anything to add. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and by now I think the board has a good idea of what it does.
Okay. This is a question. Sorry, County
I am
Council.
sorry. Mrs. Wiley asked two specific questions, if I'm not mistaken. She asked for answers for. If I could try to answer those, unless somebody else wanted to. Does it specifically exclude, and I'm assuming she means post-election, pre-sworn elected officials. I don't think, defined elected officials in any way to say whether it does or doesn't. I think the intent is, I don't consider someone an elected official until they've actually been sworn in, and we've gone over this. It doesn't expressly say that, but if I were asked my opinion, I would say it only applies to people who are actually county elected officials, meaning, they're sworn in and have taken their oaths and all those things, and we went over of when that takes effect. I think there's some time in January, and that's by statute. But we don't specifically reference that statute to mean that. And then the other thing about penalties, what it does say is that if the spending limits established in the travel policy are exceeded, that it's the personal responsibility. It doesn't impose any fines in the sense of penalties, but it has consequences, I guess would be a different way to put it. So those are just, if I was trying to answer her questions, that would be what I'd say.
And that was identified. If somebody did that and exceeded it without approval,
It
they
would
would
be
be
out of
responsible
pocket.
for their,
Right, but
would be out of their pocket.
to call that a penalty, again, it's just verbiage there, but that's a consequence. It's not I don't think it's a fine, anyway. So does that answer your question? Anyway, that's up to the board.
Are we okay?
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Mr. Huddle, and it does pretty much. It's just in going through the invoices, when I did the spreadsheets on the invoices of the travel expenditures, there had been dollar amounts approved for a commissioner's travel from the road department that had not been approved. In other words, it wasn't that the budget here had already been exceeded and the dollar amounts had been taken from the road department. In addition to that, there was documentation that that a staff person's credit card had been used to cover expenses for someone. And those are concerns, and that's really why I raised the two questions, for whatever it's worth. And I'm very satisfied with what you had to say, and I
Thanks.
appreciate it very much.
I think this policy builds in some pre-travel authorizations
I think
on
that-
behalf of the board
and I appreciate that.
might avoid those circumstances.
I just wanted
in the
it.
future. Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate
You're welcome.
Commissioner Boyce?
So this team can either set me up for success or failure. And if you make it so restrictive that requires the time I do not have to contribute to pre-book work and all that, it's almost demoralizing. And as far as the AOC convention was shortly after early December, the November election, there were numerous newly elected commissioners that were encouraged to go by AOC, which you could verify, to be there and learn firsthand as much as they possibly could, as early as they could, about their new job. And that was incredibly invaluable time. And while I knew, for the most part, not friends, but knew the Coos County commissioners, it was also invaluable time. And I'll be glad to pay that $70 back. Again, I don't turn in meals. So I'm asking this board to ease up a little bit. The voters trusted me. That's incredibly clear and obvious. I've not broken that trust. And so I'm asking for this subject to be closed at least for a few months to see where we are. And when I do travel, as you know, I bring everything back to you and try and keep you as informed as I possibly can and fulfill that responsibility. And I'm glad to do it. So with your comment on the 19th that, you know, mocking County College, Mr. Huxley, I'm just really disappointed. And I really implore you to understand what you're missing and what the consequences has been for this county. It is immeasurable. And I think some of that, maybe most of it, could have been avoided if you would have had a humbling spirit and attended that instead of be one of the very few commissioners in the state of Oregon that thought it was unnecessary, or whatever your reasons were. Thank you. And I'm asking again for a workshop so we can get this. I'll have several commissioners here that can give you some wonderful insight. Former commissioners have all testified against it. Excuse me, that's not accurate. That was on the county manager, but I would offer you that, again, former commissioners that care deeply about this county would also suggest, wait a minute, here's why we have to travel outside this county. And if one of you want to take some of that responsibility, let's have that in the workshop. Let's make that a high priority matter. And it's not something the county administrator can do. Right now, I'm the only one that can and is doing it. And I've give you plenty of information why it's critical that I keep doing it. Don't shoot my horse out from underneath me so I can't be responsible to people that are counting on me and us to get the job done. There are so many issues. Thanks again.
Okay, I have a question for the commissioners, and it's a matter of, I have a document that I'm going to present on this subject. It will address.
I just need to be excused. This is sort of an emergency. I'll be back in a little bit.
It will address your requests to, provide examples of abuse on the 19th, which you've also repeated today. I would like to just go ahead and do that after we have voted on this versus before. So is that, but I need, I think, a consensus from the commission to do it that way.
It's fine with me.
It doesn't say we're voting on this. It's not a, it just says it's we've listed it under what?
So do you have a, well, we
We're
put
going to
it
vote
on
on
for
this
a vote.
today?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. That's your decision, or that was predetermined? It doesn't say we're voting on this today.
Okay.
It's not properly listed, in my view, in the agenda.
Go ahead with then Commissioner Go. I will make my comments in my presentation after we have a motion, or, and vote on this.
Okay.
Okay. I think it would be more contiguous, to do it that way. So do we have a motion to approve the travel policy as presented today?
I make a motion to approve the travel policy as presented today.
Do we have a second? I second the motion. Do we have any further discussion? Commissioner Boyce?
No.
Commissioner Gold?
No.
Call for the question?
No.
Aye. Okay. Okay, so. 58. Okay, John, Joshua, would you please get this on so I can do this presentation? Or, yeah.
Oh, no, not this again.
You need the mouse, Commissioner?
Is this the mouse?
That's the mouse. You want to borrow the mouse to get out of that? These you can have also, John. Glasses on. And the document this electronic document will be put into the public record. Let's see what we can do here. Lots of somebody's been adjusting the mouse again.
Do we have this written, Commissioner Huxley?
Pardon me?
Do you have this written to hand out, like
No.
the courtesy I show
No.
you?
No.
No.
But you will. You have the electronic document.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this goes back to basically addressing the questions from the July 19th meeting from Commissioner Boyce. You know, there have been no abuses. Show me abuses. You know, prove it. So that's what I'm going to address here. You read several prepared scripts. You made, in my opinion, false, unfounded statements claiming that there was no abuse. And about 25 minutes or 20 minutes into the discussion, you became agitated with County Counsel for asking whose document you were reading from. Well on into the discussion, your main position on the elected travel policy appeared to be recent former commissioners had stayed within the established county budget and there was no issue there. You referred to ex-Commissioner Smith numerous times during your comments. So what I'm going to do is, to your question, okay, what documentation do you have? I am submitting the following. And we have, and they will follow, but there are tools that we receive at the county. They are revenue and expense reports. We receive them monthly. They're a great tool if used properly to show you where you are on any particular budget, be a commissioner's budget, a board of commissioners budget, a county council, a county, on and on and on and on and on with all the different departments. It's a great tool. And to go up just slightly, the first full year that the prior commission was in office was the fiscal year 13-14. And what I will show further on here in these actual documents, these actual revenue and expense reports, is that this revolves, and I just did 2 years. There was a third year with similar situations, but these two are indicative and are used to answer your question. I have 3 different months here, but for the fiscal year 2013-14, for the county commissioners, only the county commissioners, not the Board of Commissioner office, the revenue and expenses for the 9 months ending March 31st, 2014 had already exceeded the budget by over $5,000. The budget, the approved budget was approximately $15,000 for materials and services. As of March, they were already over $20,000. So it was a tool there to flag overspending and abuse. It was just ignored. The next one on B was for another comparison for the 11 months on the same fiscal year ending May 31st, 2014. Again, it's the same budget for materials and services, except now the actual year-to-date had exceeded $25,000. On the final budget, the materials and services now, because in this particular budget, not only the one section of the budget had been exceeded, the entire commissioner budget had been exceeded, and therefore there are other things that have to take or are taken into play there, as far as you can't have an out of budget by Oregon law. It has to be debits and credits. It has to be balanced. It has to be a balanced budget. So that's some of the paperwork, accounting transactions that were done. The actual spending as of the year end on the original approved budget for materials and services of $15,000 was $29,000, or roughly double. Okay. That then basically met a threshold and initiated a resolution by law. There had to be a resolution. And this can be found in the Commissioner's journals, but resolution number 20027 corrected and moved money to balance the budget, which had been exceeded by the Commissioners. The same, I'll go down here, oops, too far. It was the same scenario with different numbers for 2014-15. Okay. And again, here I used just two. I used the 9 months and then the end, or the fiscal year in the 12 months ending 6/30/2015. Again, material and services had then been moved up from, budgeted from $15,000 the prior year to $19,000 this year, and it was still exceeded by $4,000 approximately. There was no need, because there were still sufficient funds in the 2014-15 total commissioner budget, because you have three sections. You have a revenue part, you have a labor part, or basically for salaries and the perks, the benefits that go with them. That's in the one section for salaries or wages. Then you have materials and services as a third part. In this particular year, they had excess of $30,000 to $40,000 that was not spent in the wage benefit part, because I was running, or had run on, a platform of $10,000 wages, and they had budgeted for the full 60 or whatever thousand wages it was. So they had a significant overage on it in the total budget. But materials and services, which is basically the travel, et cetera, of commissioners, vehicle uses and so forth, they all are lumped under materials and services on this particular revenue and expense report. If you were going to go to and have an association fee, that would also be a line item under materials and services. Then you referred to clearly the documentation presented by Catherine Wiley, which has been addressed here. As we go a little bit final point here, you had submitted also some documentation that showed your travel expenses from November 10th. It was a document that you, when did you hand it in? I forget. But it was documentation from November 10th, 2016, which was that was the post-election, being sworn in, through March 10th, 2017. And the travel-related expenses on that document for November and December totaled a little over $1,000 for attending meetings for the Association of Oregon Counties and the Association of O&C Counties. You have, during that meeting on the 19th and again today, not been too complimentary toward me for not wanting to attend those types of meetings. Just as a point of fact, after my post-election in November 14, after that I did travel and attended Association of Oregon County meetings in November, December, and I attended Association of O&C County meetings in, was it November or December, being sworn in, that were significant. My expenses charged to the county for that were zero. A matter of fact, it was many, many months after I was sworn into office. The accounts payable clerk in the finance department came to me one day very concerned that somebody had fraudulently used my credit card. That was the first time I'd ever used the credit card, and I think it was for the GIS manager in 2000, I guess it was 16. Came down and I offered for the Curry County to provide her lodging, and that card was used for that. Again, the clerk thought it was somebody had fraudulently used my credit card because apparently it was the first time it had ever been used. Now, we're going to go on here, and I will slowly, I have also included again the documentation that was provided by Catherine Wiley back in, what did we say? It was 2016. But this is an example, and I've highlighted these. This is an example of what this very valuable tool looks like that we receive, that staff, elected officials, department heads, so forth and so on, receive on a monthly basis. It usually runs about a month behind, so that in July, the 1st of July, we might be receiving something for June, for May. Okay, it's a great, great tool if it's used in the way it was designed to be used. Okay. So if we go down, this was the 9 months, and you'll see here when I was talking about, you have a revenue section, then you have, call it expenditures in the wages, okay? And then sometimes on the same page, sometimes it wraps to the next page, and this is what happens to be on the same page. You have materials and services is what it's called when we get down to the bottom, or yeah, materials and services expenditures. There is where you can quickly see
Commissioner Huxley, I have an emergency in my family. I'll get back as quick as I possibly can.
Hope everything's okay, Commissioner Boyce. So if you go down here, the column, you'll see, in this case, like conference fees, for example, the middle column that shows $15,016 is the budgeted amount. That's the approved budgeted amount for that fiscal year. And you'll see the column just to the left is the actual expenditures. And this always lags, so that, you know, once you see, if you're seeing something in January, for example, which would be the 7th month of a fiscal year, and you see that at 90% or whatever for some reason, because it's lagging, you're probably already at 100% there. Okay. So any of these numbers, the columns to the far right are the actual percents of budget. So again, when you see their conference fees, that goes out to zero because nothing was budgeted. So even if $1 had been spent, it doesn't calculate in a negative percent. Okay. You go down to travel, meals, and lodging, $4,000 was expended, or budgeted, about $3,700 had already been spent. So you're at 91, or call it 92%. So you know that's already a red flag if you're only in March. The others are significant overages already, but the bottom line, you're 137% of budget 9 months through. And yet, it just keeps going, and that's what's happened. It just keeps spend. Okay, all the flags are there. There hasn't been anything in place to do anything to fix it. Just to continue to spend. Again, it will be the same. This one was I went a little too fast there. This was the March 31st one. And it goes on through the May. And that's the second page, or the back page on it. And then the June, the year end. And at that point, you can see when I mentioned all of the things had been changed back, so that if one was only to look at the June revenue and expense, the final one, they would think everything was just fine. You have to be using these tools before all these adjustments are made. In many cases, a lot of these adjustments aren't made. When you have overages, they leave them to show overages because it's a tool that you should use for the next year and the next year and the next year. Okay. I'm going to go through the rest. Here was the document that was required by law to be created for that first fiscal year because of the overages for the entire spending year, the fiscal year spending for that department in total. And this is typically what those orders look like. It'll show exactly the same things in materials and services. It shows what was under, what was over, and then it's signed and put into the record. It's filed with the clerk, with the county clerk. I'm just going to go forward quickly through these others. Again, they're in the document. This is the next year. In June 30th, they had 7 different revisions in the final, year end. There's the older letter from Catherine Wiley with all of the expenses. Of this case, it was Commissioner Smith. That was attached also to that same document on an organizational chart. This comes from the road department, and the road department is extremely well documented in how they maintain and cost out the vehicles. this is just a summary. This is a summary of the one vehicle that was assigned to the commissioner. In this case, it was Commissioner Smith. But they have supporting worksheets where they show when they changed the oil, when they did this, when they did that, and they use all that data to come up with what the cost per mile is that they cost different vehicles, because they have costs that might be perhaps 25, maybe not that low, 25 cents a mile, might be 30, 35, 34, 36, 40, 45. And they will cost each vehicle so that they know, number one, from an odometer, how many miles the vehicle was driven and how much it cost to operate that, and it is costed to the respective departments and ultimately paid by the taxpayers. And this is the document that I had talked about that had been handed in. Let me go up just slightly for the date. This was submitted by Commissioner Boyce during the March 1st, 2017 Board of Commissioner meeting. And it showed his pre and post cost one. So when I made a comment about it, was about a little over $1,000. You have $621 for November of 16, and you have $433. So you add the two up, and they're slightly over $1,000. That's post-election, pre being sworn in. So those are my comments. I see. Are you okay with having Catherine Wiley come up, or not?
Oh, I'm fine. That's fine.
You want to come up then? 'Cause
Thank you.
about 10 of these pages was your document.
I just would like to say, if you're going to have her come up, I think other people would be allowed to come up as well.
Okay.
Thank you. And the reason that I requested this is obviously it has been my name that has been presented here, and it has me who appears to have been personally addressed by Commissioner Boyce, and I regret the fact that he had to leave for whatever reason. I want to reiterate the fact and the documentation that Commissioner Huxley has presented, because it appears that Commissioner Boyce erroneously perceives this to be a personal issue. This is not a personal issue. If you notice, my first assessment was done in October. And some of this was done because there were accusations that Mr. Brock Smith's records were being investigated by the existing thing. And I thought, well, that's curious, and it piqued my curiosity, and I decided to look into it. So as you can see, before Commissioner Boyce was even elected, the submission was made in October of 2016. In March of 2017, when I submitted the complete file on spreadsheets of Commissioner Brock Smith's expenditures, costs to the county, to we taxpayers, including things that I found extremely questionable, casinos and window blinds and car washes and so forth and so on. From October through now, I have felt that it was essential to protect the finances of the county and the citizens in the county, that there be a public policy. So I want to reiterate my gratitude that has occurred. Obviously, things can be tweaked and done. In my perception, it does not exclude travel. In fact, it gives flexibility to use unexpended funds for travel that's determined necessary. And I, quite frankly, take offense that anyone presents this as a personal issue, because it is not. And I thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the audience wish to comment? I think that is the, now we have agenda item 13, which did have, and I saw her earlier, community development schedule for future zoning ordinance hearings, public hearings. And it was one page dated dated July. It's the last page, I believe, on the packet.
231?
231, correct. Or 131. Page 131.
Oh, last page on my packet's 231. What was that?
Your packet has the maps in it.
Oh, gotcha. So it's 131.
Okay. And
Oh,
I think
that's a map.
it was basically most all of these, I believe, except one. No, maybe two. Okay. There is a special hearing on, and this was to verify and make sure that it, because of the amount of time that's required in giving public notices on some of these hearings, it's not just you can send it out a few days before and there's no problem.
Right.
Quite to the contrary. Some of these, I think, are going to require additional postcards also into the thousands. I know they are. So there was one hearing, well, that was today on 8/2, another scheduled on 9/6, which is a Wednesday, one scheduled at this point, at least tentatively, and if we have a majority in Commissioner Boyce's absence, if that fits your schedule, Commissioner Gold, because it's a Thursday.
9/7?
9/7.
It won't.
Okay, it won't fit your schedule?
No, it will
Okay.
not.
What, then we'll have to have, can we get a hold of
Unless it's in the evening.
John, could you see if you could call or something, see if you get a hold of Carolyn Johnson? Let's get her up here.
I did just send her an email, but
Okay.
we'll see what happens.
Let's see if we,
Continue to try to call.
yeah, let's call her too, please. 9/13 is a scheduled day, a scheduled meeting day. 9/20 is a scheduled, 10/4 is a scheduled, and I think 11/1, okay, that is also scheduled. So the only one that is not on a scheduled day that basically needs
If that hearing,
concurrence is the 9/7.
if that hearing were in the evening, that would work for me.
I want to wait till we get her up
Okay.
here. You know.
Yeah, and you haven't
Okay.
noticed the public on any of this yet, right?
I don't know if that's the case on the 9. I don't want to say that for sure.
Okay.
But, okay. I don't think on the 9/7, because that was one of the reasons for this,
Okay.
or for this discussion here. While we're waiting, under Commissioner comments, do you have any comments, Commissioner Gold? Any other comments?
Let me just say that we're working diligently. I've got a couple of meetings scheduled to take care of the health workshop that's coming up the 17th, and we've got a great place for it, so I think we've got some good things going.
Okay. We just went through and discussed the one specific, well, the one page where you'd shown the public hearing schedule. Okay. And the one question was the 9/7. All the others were on scheduled meeting days.
Yes.
The one on 9/7 was a Thursday. Commissioner Gold said she can't make that.
Okay.
Unless it's evening.
Nope.
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 Did you already send postcards?
No,
after
absolutely
that?
not.
Okay.
No, I
Okay,
would not
good.
do that until I knew.
So do you want to
No,
get back to us or look at that?
no,
and-
I'll figure out when I can do it on a regular meeting date.
Okay.
Just let the BOC office know.
Okay, okay. That was easy.
Is that all?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
County Council, did you have any comments under 13 or?
Under 13, well, just a couple. So we have a 2.5-hour rule that we kind of exceed on a regular basis, and I think you noticed today and most days that At noon, we have to break to give John Jesuit a mandatory, lunch break for wage and hour laws. I would like the board to consider revisiting the 2.5-hour rule and break it up into 2 hours and 2 hours, 10 to noon and 1 to 3. And then if you get done earlier, that's fine. But I think ever since we adopted that rule, we've had to go beyond that. So that's one item that I'd like the board to think about changing so that we have less disruption to staff schedule and, that it more conforms with what the actual experience is.
So could we put that on the next agenda?
I think we could. I can if that's
the
a
decorum.
consensus.
I think that was in the decorum.
It's a
and
lot.
It's 2.5 hours now, not 2.
It is 2.5. It's a bullet item in the decorum rules, but I'd propose changing it to say we're going to go from 10 to noon and from 1 to 3, and then see if we can work within that. But that will eliminate the issue I think Commissioner Boyce was referring to earlier when we had to take a break after 2 hours, was to give John Jesuit his lunch, and it's just disruptive, and I think that'll make it smoother. That's all I'm trying to do there.
Could we do that right now instead of having to do a...
you could direct me to bring it back, and we'll bring it back, and
just
we'll get it voted on.
Bring it back. We can't make the decision now.
Okay.
I feel like there was one other item I wanted to talk to the board about, but we do have an exec session we need to go into, and that's about all I really had then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce, do you have any comments under Commissioner updates?
I do. Forgive my intrusion or stepping out there. Nothing Dad couldn't handle. All my family showing up here, and it's a tradition we have. I have just a couple things. We're at the conclusion of the general meeting. Do I have that correct?
Other than the executive session.
Okay. I can make it really fast here. I'm going to hand you some information, but I don't want this to fall between the cracks. But when I went up to testify the bank robber thing, that information's all here. The guy that chased and shot at me was able to go by the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, Oregon State Marine Board, Association of Oregon Counties, Oregon Department of Revenue, Department of Employment, Human Services, 2 different business matters in the Capitol. And then I got to go back to the Oregon Department of Veterans, which was very nice. Then I spent all day Wednesday at the Portland Economic Summit, a full day. And I split the expenses with the county, by the way. And it's all right here. And very 2 productive days, I felt. And so I'll hand you out a couple of these. And also, my salary cut that I took during our budget information, I'm going to do that for 1 year, and then I'm going to re-examine and see what our finances are and the general position that the county is in. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that was a 1-year thing, and I don't know about after that. So here, I'll hand you these, and I'll also have one for the record. And then one other matter that
do you want one? I'll just wait until they get it on the...
Oh, I'll take it. That's fine.
Such enthusiasm. I appreciate it very much when you travel out of the area and bring back information for me.
Was that enthusiasm or sarcasm?
Well, I don't get very much in the way of printed information from you.
Or insolence.
And reports. Also in Salem, the Oregon business, the indebtedness that we have on the courthouse window project from several years ago, we're paying that principal down very slowly. I'm slowly but surely working with Dennis McKnight, who actually used to work here at the courthouse. Neat guy, an old friend, capable person. I didn't know he worked for Oregon Business. I'm trying to encourage him to consider a discount in the payment of that, because it's still a lot of money that we owe. And I just wanted to report to the board that is a possibility we might be able to amend that. And I doubt if we'll get a better interest rate, but it doesn't hurt to try. I met with him and another gentleman up there that...
What's our current rate?
I have it. I think it's 6. But I'm not sure of that. I'm drawing a blank right there, but I do have that documentation. I don't have it with me.
That's okay.
May I add something to that?
Yeah, and I know I had a letter from you too, which was very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I had addressed that with the county department a year and a half, 2 years ago. as far as just paying the principal off because of the interest. They, at that point in time, they had paid more in
Yes.
interest than they had in principal, and that was over about a 10-year period already.
And yet we don't have the money to do that. I think our best bet, just off the cuff here, is to just draw it out as long as we can, pay as little per year as we can until we get our financial house in order. And then I have one more thing, and we can go into executive session. This is your comments about secret meetings, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to read a little bit of this. When you presented the information, the 26-minute presentation on the impropriety or the under the public laws, how the meeting should be conducted. And here is from Gene Jiten, Oregon Department of Revenue. I have a copy for you also. Any discussion about the details of the budget document should always be in a forum of a public meeting. The action is supported by Oregon's public meeting laws and local budget laws. Under public meeting laws and policy, talks about the transparency in all deliberations. I remember well when you ran for commissioner, Mr. Huxley, that you challenged the previous board that they were not transparent, were not responsive to your questions. The Oregon form of government requires an informed public aware of discussions. Maybe a secret meeting isn't the right description, but nonetheless, I challenge you, and I don't think we have, as far as I know, we haven't had any additional surprises come up lately. About halfway through here, thank you. In general, discussion of the Budget Committee must always take place in the forum of a public meeting. One of the reasons Oregon uses the Budget Committee process is to ensure public comment and full disclosure of budget deliberations. It is much better to abide by the spirit of the law and to hold all discussions at Budget Committee meetings. The Budget Committee may not deliberate on the budget document as a body before the first meeting. That was from the Department of Revenue, which I visited the other day, as listed in your information. From Oregon Attorney General Public Records and Meetings, Manual 2014, page 137, a gathering of less than a quorum of a committee, subcommittee, advisory group, or other governing body is not a meeting under the public meeting laws. However, while a gathering of less than a quorum is not a meeting, members of a governing body should not gather as a group or groups composed of less than a quorum for the purpose of conducting business outside the public meetings law. Such a gathering creates the appearance of impropriety and runs contrary to the policy of public meeting laws, which supports keeping the public informed of the deliberations of governing bodies. You're welcome to a copy if you like, sir. Thank you. I think that's all I have.
You want a copy?
Sure.
Did Kirk get a copy?
Whoops.
Well, he needs to get a copy.
I usually don't forget you do it.
And this is,
Do you want one?
Commissioner, actually, we at least admit that it give the appearance of impropriety or secrecy or deliberations. I mean, when you have 3 out of 6 there, that with you as acting chairman of the board, that certainly could have been interpreted as the deciding vote, therefore could have been a quorum. But I'm just challenging you that I don't intend to, I just don't think we should do anything like that. And I think the public is really disappointed.
are you through, Commissioner Smith, with your comments?
Commissioner Smith?
I'm sorry. Commissioner.
No surprise
Boyce?
there.
Commissioner Boyce?
I'm through, yes, sir.
Okay. So we're going to go into 238. Going to go into executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute 192.660, subsection 2, subsection D, for an update from County Council on union negotiations. So there's no members of, well, no members of the press can't be present for that anyway. Julie, you're staying? Okay.
Are we ready? I'll call on the council.
2:53 p.m. on Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017, and we are adjourning the meeting.
Thank you again, Commissioner Gold.
What was that?
I submitted